What's up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I might have to edit that out if it turns out that it was too low for my mic to pick up since we don't have an ASMR mic. We should maybe do that, Grant. Power rankings, NBA power rankings, ASMR. I'm sure a lot of people
and I'll
tune
just
in.
I don't know, like click my pen next to the mic. Maybe that's probably soothing.
I'm gonna chew on ice cubes from my drink, my drink right now. This is Hardwood Knocks. Welcome back. Thank you all for joining us. We are here to talk some evergreen content. The playoff series have winnowed down. We will still cover the playoffs as we deem fit, but we're putting out the dated content. We're just getting tired of it. We want to talk about some offseason stuff, some evergreen things, which is why we have every NBA team's toughest free agency decision in 2024 to get to. Grant will be handling the Eastern Conference. I will be handling the Western Conference. We are going to try and pace ourselves as we typically say, so that we can get to all 30 teams in expeditious fashion. And I don't know that I have any other notes. It's all relative. These decisions will, I think for some teams, they'll be relatively easier, or the scale at which the decisions matter is you're certainly at the behest of, okay, well, who's a free agent from this squad? And we're focusing solely on their own free agents. It's not, oh, should the Thunder spend their $35 million in cap space on bringing back James Harden or something? So that's not what we're focusing on here. However, I do have a question. Grant, why didn't you call me certified fantabulous when you did the intro last time?
Oh, I blew it. You should. That's a note you got to give me right after. I was just trying to remember. Because it's your certified fantabulousness, I feel like is implied, so we don't have to highlight it. I forgot that, didn't I?
I honestly, I forgot too until a YouTube commenter said, so Grant is certified fantabulous and Dan isn't. I was like, so
I mean, there's a really long process involved. There's like a board of governors that has to vote on it.
I'm really looking forward to applying next year.
Yeah. And don't get discouraged. It takes, most people, it takes several go rounds it's like the Hall of Fame. Like sometimes you need to get,
if it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, then,
Yeah, no, and then everybody's in.
Grant, how are you doing though?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to get to this particular bit of evergreen content because we've been like tentatively scheduling it for what feels like several weeks now and just not getting to it. So I'm a big fan of like checking things off, and so we're gonna be able to do that with this. And also, I mean, like, we are at the point in the playoffs where there's really not that much left, and
everyone's talking about the same. I'm not saying that ESPN covering only Bronny James is okay, but everyone is covering the same four teams at this point, and we will check in on the playoffs as we deem fit. But like, let's let these series get a couple games under their belt this time. Think about how many times we adjusted our priors during the first two rounds because we were just talking about basically every series after each game.
I know that's like, I feel like that was probably a takeaway from last year and the year before and the year before that, but it's really going to be my takeaway from this postseason is just to just chill out after each game and not, because you want to have something to say, or you want to feel like, okay, we peeled back a layer of this series and I understand it now on this level. Here's how things will go. And it's just like, you're never going to be, I mean, it'll be rare that after game one, it's like, I got it now. I got a handle on this. Or look, Minnesota, Denver, it's like, okay, so after two games, I really have a handle. And then after four, it's like, no, I have the opposite handle. You just can't.
Literally
I don't know how to avoid that though. I don't know how you
the entire Nuggets Wolves series, by the way, that you just described.
Yeah.
Just like,
that was the most extreme swings of a series that I can remember. So I think, I don't know how, but that's the thing is then, after each game, if say next year when we start to talk about the games, it's like we have to put this giant caveat up front of but actually we have no idea what's going to happen because we never do.
It's also that, and I feel less emotionally invested in content that I know is going to be dated within 36 hours that we're putting out. And so it's sometimes, that needs to happen. Like we do the series previews or whatever, but that's why you have to allocate time to what's going to, I think, hold more value. And right now, I think us talking about what's going to happen in free agency, because there are 26 other fans and fan bases in the league, it'll be a nice little primer for the offseason before we actually do our offseason look aheads or primers, because we don't do what are they normally called? See, we've rebranded it so much, the number one podcast in the world. I don't even know what previews are. They're just look aheads and outlooks. Grant, you are starting us off with we're going to go alphabetically again because we like to live dangerously, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's begin with the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, this was a tough one just right out of the gate because the Atlanta's main issues just don't have anything to do with free agency. It's obviously it's going to be Trae Young or DeJounte Murray, who's going, if anybody, in a trade. And then there's the Jalen Johnson extension eligibility to consider. And then quite a bit further down the list, there is free agency. And so if you had to pick one, which I did, I went with Sadiq Bey. There's two like obvious complicating factors here for him. One is that he's a restricted free agent. So like, how tough of a decision is it to just match the market rate offer sheet that he gets, or try to avoid that by giving him a reasonable deal up front? And the other one is he tore his ACL, so he's going to be compromised. Like, I don't know how that affects his, contract prospects. It certainly doesn't help them. But that's going to be another factor that weighs into both the offer sheets he gets from other teams and what the Hawks may be willing to pay to match. But I would say, like, I guess probably you would label his tenure in Atlanta a disappointment since the trade from the Pistons, but he does play a position that they kind of need a little bit, like just the idea of a spacing, like higher volume 3-point shooter. Since I guess AJ Griffin is just like not going to play ever again, and nobody is convinced that DeAndre Hunter is the answer. So I went with him. There's a couple other options: Garrison Matthews, Wes Matthews, team option on the former, unrestricted for the latter. But that's about it. I don't know how you feel about Sadiq Bey and the difficulty of his free agent decision for the Hawks.
I probably would have went with Garrison Matthews. Are we going to keep this guy? Are we going to let him go? I think that might be the bigger deal for Atlanta. But no, I mean, this is really the only option for them. I don't really know if they should bring him back, though. Like, I don't know if he played an important, and they do have Jalen Johnson just sitting there. So unless you think he's going to play a ton of three, or you want to downsize a bunch, but the cost might just be so negligible at this point following the ACL injury that perhaps you just bring him back. And you mentioned AJ Griffin, who like the team doesn't seem high on, or at least they haven't treated him like they're particularly high on him. This just might be a guy that you need to bring back because the price is right. And what else are we supposed to do there? And we're so thin on those wing combo forward types anyway, that we just need to do it. I mean, the other thing though is maybe we tell them to handle their two-way conversions a little bit better. The fact that Vit Krejci could not play in the in the play-in was pretty disastrous.
That was weird. So Boston, we did way under 3 minutes for Atlanta, but I feel like
it was 2 minutes and 40 seconds. But
shit.
That just proves we don't have a concept of time.
Yeah. All right. So that takes us to Boston. Another kind of for different reasons, because there's not a lot of tough decisions here because everybody that really matters is going to be under contract for next season. So you've kind of got a choice between Luke Cornett and Xavier Tillman, to me, as like just which of the backup bigs, or in this case, like Cornett actually played in game 1 against Indiana because Porzingis is out and he just moves up the depth chart. They're both unrestricted free agents. They both are probably minimum level players. So it's just kind of like which of the two, or both. I mean, really, like at this point, you could bring both back just as further Porzingis insurance, I guess. But if you had to choose between one or the other, I don't know. It seems like they would pick Cornett. He played a little more than Tillman after the All-Star break when they were both actually on the team. Higher true shooting percentage. Tillman brings just the switchable defense. And it's sort of like, I don't know if it's kind of a false narrative that they need to choose between them, but I would probably lean Cornett. But we're talking like minimum salary stuff here. So it's not like a huge pressing issue.
Yeah. I mean, they are, without factoring in, if you keep Xavier Tillman's cap hold just because it's so small and he's technically a restricted free agent, they're at $196+ million in payroll. And so that puts them past the second apron. I wonder if they just see value in, do we see one of these guys get like an inflated short-term contract that they have, because they do have picks if they want to move. And if they're really going to be all in on this current time, like, oh, we're going to go after it another year and we'll deal with the ramifications and figure it out once Jason Tatum's supermax ends up kicking in the following year, I believe. So I'm just interested to see, like, do they just go, we're going to pay through the nose this year, maybe we keep both, or does one of them, the one that they choose? I'm with you. I'd probably keep Cornett, but does the one that they choose end up getting sort of an inflated price point because of their tax situation? You need, now, for anyone who just doesn't know this, if you're going to be a second apron team, you cannot take back more money than you send out in a trade. You either have to take back less or be a dollar for dollar match. And that, we were just talking about this for something that we're working on before we came on, that once if the top 6 players are off limits, I assume, Al Horford's getting older, but he's been pretty important. I mean, we've seen like defenses go after him, but yeah, in terms of staying. It's not, he can still stay in for, this is so not related, but Al Horford can still stay kind of in front of guys. He struggles when they're going to create separation, like going back to their step backs and their pull ups.
Yeah.
So,
which was the case in game 1 against the Pacers. Like they started to eat against Horford later in that game.
There's your postseason analysis that everyone here was
did it.
So, yeah, Bert agrees. Shout out Bert. So, but like assuming you're not going to trade one of your top 6, your 7th most expensive player or your best, in this case, salary matching tool is Peyton Pritchard, who's on the books for $6.7 million. Yeah, that's why are they going to give Tillman or Cornette like more than that just to have that salary slot? Yeah. I don't know if they're going to throw money around like that, but it's something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know how much you would be a normal team that didn't have like whatever the just crippling additional tax penalties are on, say, like a $5 million salary would be, but like you really don't want to be paying double the minimum to a guy that is your like 10th or 11th man anyway, but with Boston, it's like, oh boy, that's not actually $5 million. That's like 38 million or something ridiculous. All right. That takes us to Brooklyn. This one's a little cleaner. Virtually everybody here is under contract. I mean, obviously Lonnie Walker, Dennis Smith, those guys were minimums last year. They're unrestricted, but this is Nick Claxton. It's, and it's not like, do we want him or not? It's just, what's the market going to set his value at? And then you're trying to decide what he's worth to bring back to Brooklyn. I actually had, just by way of comparison for something else I was working on, like making the case that like, there's a good chance like Isaiah Hartenstein could come really close to or even out earn Claxton, just because I mean, I think that playoff run really solidified Hartenstein's value and durability and everything. But anyway, it's Claxton for sure. Like you take the teams that have, 25 plus million in cap space, which to me is probably on the high side of what I would be willing to pay Claxton in the first year of, say, like a 4-year deal. Like Detroit, probably not. OKC, kind of interesting, but probably not. Orlando, no. Philly, no. Toronto, no. Utah, probably. So it's like that might suppress his value in that a lot of the teams that have money probably aren't going to be looking at a center necessarily. So I think he's probably back with the Nets, but I'm not sure what that number is going to be. Have you thought about it all? Like what his contract might look like?
I think his cap hold comes in at 18.3 million, and that feels sort of right. And when you look at what Isaiah Hartenstein can get from his early bird rights deal, where it's going to be in between the $16 to $18 million range, it'll be below that $18 million number for sure. That I guess feels right. And I also think I agree with what you said about where's the looming threat out there. If you ask me to pick the over, the under based on his cap hold at 18 million, I'm almost inclined to go under. And I try not to do this, but the center big market's always weird unless you're a star. And as you outlaid with all the teams with cap space, it feels like where's the offer coming from? A team like OKC, I think, would be easier for them to talk themselves into what Isaiah Hartenstein does than Nick Claxton because they like to play 5 out. So I just don't know where the money is going to be for him. Like maybe Detroit would come in there and say, well, we're okay with kind of this co-op with Jalen Duren for now, especially since Jalen Duren's on his rookie scale. Sure, but they need floor spacing as well. So he's a really good player. I don't know where his number winds up. They'd be foolish to let him leave though, unless it's part of a sign and trade. If I gave you that number, 18.2 million, would you take the over or the under per year?
So you're probably like an average, or we're starting at 18 and we're going up to like 20, 22, 24
let's go average that way.
Okay. That's such a good number. I guess if you're saying average value of 18, I would put it more. That's right there. So that's like 72, 18, 4 years, 72. I could see like 4 for 75, 4 for 80, something like that. Like Jared Allen, or Jared Allen 5 for 100 or 4 for 80. I can't remember. Something like that.
5 for 100, I think.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. So I guess I gotta go. I'll push. It's going to be exactly 18 million. That's the correct number. It is interesting for Claxton that like I feel like 3 to 5 years ago his skill set would have gotten him paid more, whereas now it's like there's not stretch, there's not like physical like dominant interior rim protection, and so the 5 position switchable center defender isn't like the most in vogue type like it used to be. All right, we're at Charlotte here.
What well is that the Nets are now going to be like far enough beneath the tax where they're not probably going to try and squeeze him as much as they maybe normally would have if they were more expensive. But yeah, his free agency will be fascinating.
Yeah. Moving to Charlotte. So like I don't know. We can make this as short or as long as you want to, but obviously it's Miles Bridges just because of the money and all of the like how much do we want to reset our image as a franchise with new ownership, new front office, new coach. Bridges is a good NBA player. Like, yeah, I think he is probably. I mean, this is a guy that was probably in line for a max, right, before like all the off court stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's realistic now. But this, we're talking from Charlotte's perspective. Like, this is a tough decision, both from a like, do we or don't we? Full stop. Like, do we want to be in the Miles Bridges business? And then if we do, what's that look like contract wise? Certainly not a max, but like certainly also not like mid-level money. You're going to be much closer to the max than that lower option. So it's just it's not a franchise defining decision, but it is going to give us some information about what kind of operation Charlotte's going to run here going forward.
I would just let him go. Reset your image, and or try. I mean, maybe try and facilitate a sign and trades. I don't know what cap space teams. I guess Philly and Detroit would be names that people would look at. Could Utah talk themselves into him? I don't think he'd be an OKC guy, but
No.
He will get paid though, because domestic violence issues have no bearing on that if you have the ability to take the floor.
No.
That's
probably all we need to say about that. Takes us to Chicago Bulls. My incredible opening run is nearing its end here with the Eastern Conference. I think it's DeMar DeRozan. Although all indications are like,
who's the alternative?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, well, hold on. There's a couple, don't we? Have
there's Andre Drummond, but I guess Patrick Williams. Okay,
Patrick Williams is restricted. That's interesting.
Sorry,
unrestricted. that really is it though. Like as far as guys who's even like diehards would know who they are. It's DeRozan. Well, here's the thing. It shouldn't be DeRozan because he shouldn't be on the team anymore and they shouldn't be facing free agency. Again, we'll continue this angle of analysis for Chicago until they change what they're doing.
Well, they have unfinished business, Grant.
Oh, right. Yeah, right. Is the unfinished business like winning 2 games in the first round of the playoffs? So, yeah, like I guess it's just, I think the numbers that have been loosely out there is like Chicago's willing to go like 2 years at like 40 a pop, which I guess that's better than going 4 years for, like 130 million. I don't know. They shouldn't be in this position. They are. DeMar DeRozan is still a really good offensive player. He doesn't make sense on a Bulls team that needs to rebuild, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
This is because you can't, and you letting him walk for nothing. I guess it's not disastrous, but that's terrible asset management by them.
You're stuck.
What Patrick Williams, though, very quickly, what is going to happen with he's coming off yet another season-ending injury. He's had a bunch of lower body stuff since he started his career. I think he's shown enough on defense. There's been the flashes of not just efficient 3-point shooting, but of being able to like dribble into the pull-up or do some additional things on drives offensively, but never stringing together enough of it with enough volume to make you believe like, oh, this should be someone who gets $20 to $25 million a year.
Yeah, it's tough because there are flashes there of the, he shot over 40% from deep on low volume last year and has been like pretty good, as not quite 40%, but has been a really good 3-point shooter again on low volume in more than one season. It's good combo forward defender like that has value in a lot of places. I just don't think anyone could look at the first several years of his career and conclude like there's any high usage future in this guy. It's just he's going to be a completely dependent scorer. I think based on what we've seen so far. I mean, I guess he's young enough to get better, but I mean, if I'm the Bulls, like what's the number? Like if he gets a 15 million a year offer sheet, do you match that just to preserve the asset?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, 15 million is like barely above the mid-level right now. So like if I'm a team like Utah or even Detroit and I'm trying to fuck with the Bulls' cap sheet, I was going to ask you, I think the answer is obvious because he is the restricted free agent, but who's more likely to be on a different team next season? P. Will or DeMar?
Oh, I mean, they're both. I think they're both really likely to be back.
A point of my question is, I think that even though I've just leaned DeMar DeRozan because he's the unrestricted free agent, the fact that I thought about it for a second when he is a restricted free agent, I think speaks to the fragility of just the situation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like DeRozan, they cannot. Well, unless it's a sign and trade, the Bulls like cannot let him get away because that's just that's you're Van Fleeting it a little too hard right there. All right.
Oh yeah, your run. It continues. I was about to
Almost,
go to
yeah.
Dallas. I apologize.
We can, because I don't feel great about this pick either. So options here include Isaac Okoro, who's a restricted free agent, Damian Jones unrestricted, Tristan Thompson unrestricted, Sam Merrill has a non-guarantee, so that's like technically not really free agency. Marcus Morris, Isaiah Mobley. You think Isaiah Mobley is going to be back on the Cavs next year? He's getting some Thanasis.
Did you say this decision was hard?
Well, it's a Okoro, I think,
Okay.
right? I was just going through like I mean, it's another restricted one, and I hate picking a restricted guy as a tough decision because it's just like it's actually not tough. It's pretty simple. If the number that he signs for is cool with you, you just match it, and that's the end of the conversation. I mean, in terms of like the Cavs' existence as a whole, like we've got a lot of other issues to deal with in Cleveland that this team could look very different next year. Right. But I would say Okoro has not been the exact kind of player that they've wanted at that spot, especially given his draft pedigree. Like the shooting, no one ever feels super confident in. He's still kind of a liability offensively in the playoffs for that reason. Really good defender.
Another postseason where he didn't shoot it well and defenses didn't care and the volume wasn't there.
Yeah. I think like it really is just a reliable 3-point shot away from being like, oh, he's a high end like playoff starter, because all the other stuff he's can handle just fine. It just doesn't really have an offensive role to play. So I don't know. Well, how about this? I think Patrick Williams should sign a bigger offer sheet than Okoro does. But even though they're like similarly situated in terms of their draft slots and like, I guess, roles on the team. But it just feels like because Okoro is a little smaller, doesn't have that like big time defensive versatility that Williams might. I think Williams might end up getting a big offer.
Yeah, that's interesting because Okoro's, I think, still the better player, but he doesn't have the same defensive scalability where Williams can guard kind of 1 through 4, if you really, or 2 through 4. And like even Okoro's just like if you start to put him on like true size wings, it gets iffy, which is also part of the problem in Cleveland. Is now you have these 2 small guards, and your best perimeter defender really shouldn't be checking the bigger wings, which makes getting to his number pretty difficult. They just still have so much room beneath the second apron, at least until all the Donovan Mitchell's next contract will kick in soon. If they sign him to an extension, then you have to deal with Evan Mobley. Will Darius Garland still be on the team? Jared Allen's next deal, he should probably be. He should have demanded a trade already. Personally, that's what I think. So I think they keep him. In terms of the number, I think he'll get more than the mid level, right? 12.4 million. He'll get over that.
Right, as you said, he'll get more than, I was like 12 was like about the number that I was going to say. So I don't know. I guess he might, but it feels like right around there to me.
I feel like 3 for 45 or maybe even 3 for 50. Like the new cap climate makes it tough too. But like it wouldn't shock me if it was like something like 3 for 45 or 3 for 50 or something around there.
Yeah, I'm still anchored to, I think incorrectly, the idea of like 15 million is like what you pay a starter, like that, a pretty decent starter that's not a star. I think that's probably closer to like 17, 18 now. So your 3 for 50 is on the high end, but like, I guess probably semi-realistic for him.
I guess it's my turn now. Move on to the Dallas Mavericks. You have only one option unless you think that they're not going to guarantee the contracts of Jaden Hardy and or just Jaden Hardy's their only non-guarantee.
Exum.
Yeah, excuse me, Exum. It's Derrick Jones Jr. They do not have his bird rights, and he has made himself some money during the postseason. Not just with what he's done on defense, but he's hitting his threes, making nice passes from the center of the floor. I don't know what when I was thinking about him initially, I'm like, okay, he's still a spacing liability. He is the guy that defenses aren't going to guard. But if he's going to continue to take and hit threes, I don't know what he ends up getting. For the Mavs, because they only have his non-bird rights, and this might serve us well in some of these future teams, they can offer him 120% raise off the minimum. That is not going to cut it. Now, you throw that out, and it will either take cap space, which they don't have, or an exception to re-sign him. They have some wiggle room beneath the first apron, but like it's not enough to right now to unlock the full mid-level exception of 12.4 million. I don't know if the mini MLE, which is like substantially less, is going to be enough to lock him down. I struggle to see where other suitors might come from. It feels like he's not going to be the priority of a team. And so, but I also think that he has probably earned himself more than just, okay, like the taxpayer mid-level is, what is it for next season? 5.2, I think it's projected to be.
Yeah.
That seems low.
Yeah.
Wow. Why does that seem so low? Well, anyway.
I don't know, but that's what I have too on my sheet.
Yeah, I thought it was a typo on my sheet. So I think he gets more than that, right?
I mean, he has to. As you're laying it out, I just keep thinking like, oh, he's definitely not coming back to Dallas. Like I mean, if even if they had the full MLE, that would be.
No, I think if he gets the full MLE, I might be a little bit. So, and the thing with also that you have to consider is if you're going to give him the full MLE, let's say they were able to open up, like they could move Tim Hardaway Jr. and save money that way and just have it available. Do you want to hard cap yourself for Derrick Jones Jr.? The answer just might be yes. The way that he's been playing.
Yeah, I mean, like if we're talking about Okoro or several other guys, like Jones is starting in the conference finals. Like that's those guys aren't. Nick Claxton's not doing that. I mean, certainly Isaac Okoro's not doing that. It is like, well, first of all,
oh boy,
he's ruining one of my favorite pet like theories, which is that don't ever invest in a player who looked really good for the Heat and is changing teams. Like, because he's just never going to be as good as he was with Miami. Like, this is the best.
Did Derek White do that for you with the Spurs too?
Would say who for who?
Did Derek White do that for you with the Spurs too? The Spurs
Derek White is now like you should be all over anyone that the Spurs give up on. They've gone the other way completely. But you know what I mean? Like Jones is just the defense is. I mean, he's a huge part of Dallas's defensive makeover. And I think you're right that we can't assume that he's going to shoot it like this. And even if he does for like a whole other season, he's still someone that opponents are just, that's the guy we're going to leave. So I think like this is definitely Derrick Jones, and good for him. He's hitting the market at what is probably like the apex of his value. Like even going forward, it's hard for me to imagine him being better positioned to just do all the stuff he's good at than he is right now in Dallas. So it's kind of perfect.
I think he could be a Bruce Brown candidate too, whereas maybe he's not getting a long-term deal, but it's a 1+1 with the team option, but it's that first year is paying him $20-something million.
Here come the Thunder. What if the Thunder just want to go, we'll take another ace defender and super athlete and just play him instead
of Philly, just because they have the boatload of cap. Like, let's just have more athleticism on the court, and maybe they use him as a backup 5 in instances like when Embiid's not on the floor. So
yeah,
I don't want to get into whether he'll be back in Dallas, but if Dallas wants to keep him, I think they're going to have to preserve or actually open up the access to the full MLE. I don't see him like he's not. If he stays for the mini MLE, I'm calling shenanigans and that they're going to do the whole early bird rights dance, whereas they promised to pay him next year.
Yeah. Or a Cuban in the new ownership group was like, you get a whole casino named after you, probably in our new sports betting empire outside the arena.
Yeah, in a state where sports betting is not currently legal and doesn't have any legislation pending. But we move on. Denver Nuggets. It's KCP here. He has a player option for $15.4 million that he is projected to decline. He could always extend off of that number if they wanted to go that route, which would help the Nuggets in the sense that if you look at it through the lens of his cap hold, if he opts out, he has a $22.1 million cap hold roughly. So if you opted in and extended off that number, he'd be on the books for 15.4. So that saves you $7 million. And that's not money that you could just go spend elsewhere, but it's extra wiggle room for your tax bill. I don't know. Like, he is the guy. We're talking about Okoro, KCP, Patrick Williams, guys who could get offers. KCP fits on every single team in the league. I know he's 31. That might repress some of the offers he's getting, but you cannot give me a team with cap space that shouldn't consider going after him. Maybe it's Detroit doesn't want to get in the KCP business again when he's approaching like his post heyday, but Philly, OKC could probably they need someone who's bigger, but OKC, but fuck it. Like, yeah, we'll take this guy here. Imagine replacing Josh Giddey with KCP in your best lineup. Like, it's not Isaiah Joe either. It's freaking KCP, who had a rough offensive playoffs, to be fair. I don't know what number he winds up. You could tell me anything at this point. Is it kind of a 2-year deal? It just pays him like $60 million from another team. The Nuggets have to keep him. And if they let him walk, it's absolutely inexcusable. Christian Brown is good. Peyton Watson, who did not play in the Timberwolves series, is also good. Neither of them right now have the ability to replace KCP on the offensive end, unless you just think that KCP is not going to hit his threes. And then we could have the discussion. I think, though, what people do have to consider with Denver is that even if you like just factoring in KCP's cap hold, but let's even forget the cap hold. Let's just throw in his player option there. Like say he extends off the number. They're a few $1,000,000 then into the second apron.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's gut check time from the sense of, well, now we're going to see how married to this core the organization actually is. And the extent to which Calvin Booth has tried to prepare for this by having Peyton Watson. And I still think they allocated too many roster spots to these younger guys. And then people are talking about, it's their starting lineup that didn't fare well against the Timberwolves. It's not a depth issue. And it's, well, if you had more options and maybe didn't need to play your starter so much, things might have been different. So there's two ends of that spectrum. But I think I ultimately land at, like, I personally believe that they will bring him back, but I do find myself wondering, well, they were so invested in doing X with Christian Brown and Peyton Watson and having these other guys there. Is there a chance that it wasn't just about, well, we're replacing Bruce Brown or trying to, and then we're also planning long-term? Is letting KCP walk part of the long-term? I honestly have no idea, but he is, in terms of names we're going to talk about that absolutely cannot leave or should not leave, the Nuggets need to keep this guy.
And again, like, I can't imagine how many times we're going to go to this well, but like, just as an asset preservation move, like the leaving for nothing is always the worst possible option. If you have the ability, because like they can pay him just whatever, right? So like, as long as you're not doing it, as long as you don't hit a number that's just like no other team in the league would pay that, well, then he's a tradable asset. And like, maybe this is a way Denver a year from now or whatever, it like gets a draft pick back, or like, or something like that, or takes back less money. It just like, you cannot let him leave in free agency. That's for a number of reasons, but not the least of which being you're already really inflexible because of how expensive this roster is in the second apron. You can't let a guy go that could down the line maybe buy you back a little bit of flexibility if you're willing to like float that number for a year or however long it ends up being.
Which I did very quickly, just because I know we spend a lot of time on the Nuggets. His cap hold is around $22 million, which is just over 15% of the salary cap that's projected to come out next year. If he opts out, is he getting more or less than that on an annual basis?
I think definitely more, in large part because of the like short-term big dollar deal you mentioned as a possibility, like a 2 for $60 or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
That I just like,
if it's a 3 or 4 year deal, I would take the under on it. I do think I go back and forth, but I think that the non-stars, even in a market where teams are desperate for good, like KCP might be an exception because the market's so bad around him. But I do think we all might be in for sort of this sticker, like reverse sticker shock on certain, like, how sometimes we get it with centers where that's really all they signed for because they're not stars, unless you're Jakob Poeltl and the Raptors gave up a pick that, by the way, conveyed. Should we talk about that?
Well, we can stop discussing it then.
So I honestly, I don't have a great feel for what it's going to look like for these non-stars in the super tax era, but I would say pretty comfortably if he signs, unless he opts in, and that's the number, but if he ends up getting the same amount or less of his player option, that would shock me on an annual basis. Like, he should get more. He should clear $15.5 million, I would think, easily per year.
I think he'll be closer to the 22 cap hold figure than the 15 player option figure, like pretty comfortably, I would guess. All right, that goes back to me. I've got the Detroit Pistons. I want to try something on just to see where you're at on this. Is it absurd to have Evan Fournier's non-guarantee, or what is it? Team option, non-guarantee? Which is it? No, I can't remember.
It's a team option.
It's a team option, $19 million team option, as like a tough decision. Like in that, might you want to bring that back for, to just dump on somebody with can you use that? Is that a useful tool in any way? Or should we just talk about restricted free agency for Simone Fontecchio? I'll let you choose the adventure.
I think it has to be Simone Fontecchio because the motion shooting specifically is something that will play in the open market. And because you can have so much cap space, it sort of dilutes the importance of having Evan Fournier's salary in theory, it's valuable if you roll it over to the trade deadline. You could just sign someone who's better to a 1-year deal for just as much and roll that over the trade deadline.
Yeah, it's always intriguing to me when a team has like this fairly sizable salary that could like disappear after they, that's, oh, what do we do with that? Like, it's not just, you don't want to just let it evaporate because 19 million is like, that's something you can use for something, even if you have no intention of ever keeping Evan Fournier in the rotation or on the roster. I think it is Fontecchio. I was like toying with the idea of like how close will the contracts Fontecchio and Tobias Harris sign be?
Oh my God.
Like like is there a world that I don't think Fontecchio is ever going to make more, but considering like where Harris is, if Derek Jones is at the peak of his value, Harris, just partly because his contract was so big, is probably at about the nadir of his. And Fontecchio is like, I mean, as good or better of a movement shooter, is a good defender,
and
is
also,
younger.
Remember what he did when he was just in Detroit for 15 or 16 games, like over 15 points a game, shooting 42+% from 3, 54% on 2s. It's just, I mean, the Pistons sucked, but like he's a good
rotation / starting forward, like on a lot of teams.
I think you could make a case that, and like if you're going through you know what, I'm going to make this case. Simone Fontecchio is more important to the Pistons than Jaden Ivey. Just because think about, hold on. I'm not his ceiling. I'm not in terms of creating the floor balance necessary to optimize the single most important player in the building, who is Cade Cunningham. Simone Fontecchio is more important than Jaden Ivey. You could be like, well, what if Jaden Ivey gets a catch and shoot stroke? He doesn't have one right now, folks. And so Cade Cunningham is good now. And so for next season, unless Jaden Ivey is going to completely reinvent himself, he is more important to the Detroit Pistons than Jaden Ivey.
I just want to compliment you on establishing the parameters for an argument that seems absurd, except within the parameters you've set up. And then it's a logical argument, just like really stellar work. Cause you're right. Like if you're trying to, in the sense of how do we make the guys that matter on this roster matter more? Like he's super important in that effort.
Here's a galaxy brain thought. Simone Fontecchio is more important to optimizing Jaden Ivey than Jaden Ivey is to optimize Jaden Ivey at this point. Just like you need to throw out
you need the space.
Jaden Ivey's not going to hit enough of his shots to help manufacture himself right now. I can't even talk.
This is another case where we have a restricted free agent where the tough part, quote unquote, of the decision is like how high are we going in terms of matching or just throwing a number out there.
I mean, he's a dude that like, I guess Philly has Buddy Hield in the building. So, but like Fontecchio is a better defender, has better size to him, but like that's a team. I think you could like OKC, just like let's get someone with size who can shoot and he's not really going to help our rebounding, but he won't hurt our defense.
San Antonio, like any team that's just like, we need guys that can space and move and defend, like,
or who likes saying Fontecchio because it's fun to say. Yeah.
Who doesn't? Other than Orlando, probably not going to Orlando. Among the cap space teams, it's like he kind of works.
Honestly, he would work in Orlando too. Why can't he work in Orlando?
I mean, that illustrates how valuable he is. It's like, that's the worst of the options. And like,
okay, so let's play over under with this. That might be a separate good podcast of how much will this player get paid this offseason. Bookmark it, Grant, or folks, remind us that I just asked for this. The mid-level exception, 12.4. I'll say 12.5 million because 12.4 is so weird.
Over. I think he gets more than that. I think he should.
I would pay him more than that, but I just said that Jaden Ivey shouldn't even have been drafted, apparently.
Yeah, you just said Jaden Ivey should quit.
If that makes anybody mad, I wasn't talking about the players in a vacuum, but
right.
In terms of partnering with Cade Cunningham, I still believe it. That brings me to the Golden State Warriors, and it's Gary Payton's player out. No, I'm just it's Klay Thompson. It's just how much people are talking about, yeah, he might stay like for a hometown discount. The fuck does that look like at this point? Well, because what is Klay Thompson worth to you in a vacuum? He hit threes at a very good clip this year, but he's just getting cooked on defense, on the ball, away from the ball. He's clearly not at a point in his career where you can count on him to generate any sort of space for himself with the ball in his hands. I think he's still valuable, and there's the nostalgic, emotional component to this. There's also the luxury tax component to where if you actually, we talk about the Warriors just being so expensive, they're technically not really cheap, but like they're out of the tax right now. If they waive Chris Paul, like many expect them to do, let's assume they guarantee Kevon Looney, like they're just basically outside of the tax at that point. I think they're way outside of the tax at that point. The number I have them at, I'm looking at 145.6, which is more than $30 million underneath the tax. So there are scenarios in which if you waive Chris Paul, you can re-sign Klay Thompson and stay out of the tax. But one, how much is Klay Thompson accepting? And two, like I do think these two things are related. What is the actual aim for this team this summer is that I know Joe Lacob said in February on, I think it was Tim Kawakami's podcast, that it's not just about avoiding the second apron. It's about getting out of the tax entirely this year.
Mhm.
Again, you can do that with Klay Thompson on your roster. The method by which you do it, though, one, depends on his pay grade. Two, depends on what you want to do with Chris Paul specifically. If you want to waive him, probably not much of an issue. But if you want to keep him, is it okay? Are we moving Andrew Wiggins? Like, so I don't know where it's going to land, but it's clearly the toughest decision because there's so much that goes into, forget about the Warriors' payroll, but just like, what is Klay Thompson worth? Think about his importance to the franchise, and then the two other most important players to the franchise, and Draymond Green and Steph Curry. Steve Kerr said we need Klay Thompson after the season, or is he going to say anything else? And then finally, are there other teams that would say, like, we'll take a shot at, like, we could use it? Like, Orlando's been a team that's been thrown out there. Detroit could use him. Are you willing to just give him his max or something over 2 years to get him out of Golden State? I wouldn't, but I expect him to be back in Golden State. But like, what's a number that you're comfortable with as a team paying Klay Thompson, specifically that team being the Warriors?
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think it's different depending on which, like if you're Orlando, I think 2 years, 50 million, you could totally justify, you go much higher than that if it's that short of, or 1+1 or like something like that. For Golden State, I think I would be stunned if they offer anything close to the 2-year 48 that extension that was reportedly offered before last season that he turned down.
Okay.
That's not coming back. I think for me, if you went 2 years, like 40 million or something like that, that's about I just don't think there's a case to be made that he is worth more than that. And that's before talking about the tax implications and all the other stuff you might have to do. Like, then you're definitely waiving Chris Paul. Then you might even be hoping Gary Payton does not opt out or does opt out. Then you're also considering, like, are we going to really pull the ripcord on Kevon Looney with that partial guarantee? Like, so I think even sentiment is like impossible to avoid with this particular case. And so I guess there's a way that Golden State might go above like 20 million a year. But I think much beyond that. And it's just, how about this? I think if Thompson is back with the Warriors, he will, by definition, not be taking the biggest contract he's been offered. And so I don't know if that's something he's willing to do, because he's been so prideful and like probably pretty eager to show that he can be what he was or closer to it, like without all the system and the hell. Like, that's a scenario I could envision where he's like, I'm going to prove it. Mm-hmm. I think 2 for 40 is where the Warriors should go. I think another team probably could justify going higher. And then it's just a question of like, what does he want?
I will say this, and I agree with everything you just said. And I don't actually care what he gets paid. Good for Klay Thompson. If they're going to pay him for what he's accomplished rather than what he's going to do, good. But if the Warriors are giving him more than 20 million a year, and I would even argue if it's more than $15 million a year, I will view them as a team that is deeply unserious about making the most of what's remaining from Steph's prime. And it's nothing to do with Klay Thompson specifically. I just don't know what message that sends, that you're trying to pinch pennies and you're going this route of paying someone who is objectively to you just not worth, maybe in a vacuum, he's worth 10, 15% of the salary cap. He's not worth that to you based off what you need at this stage of where your core is at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't, the idea of him coming back at a too big of a number, I don't know if I can get on board with that. Shows they're not serious. I feel like,
well, because if they want to stay out of the tax and they're giving Klay Thompson over $20 million a year, that is not, those two goals are almost mutually, or two things are mutually exclusive of, can we pay Klay Thompson $25 million a year or duck the luxury tax entirely? They should be. They're not mutually exclusive. Let me make that clear. Mm-hmm. They should be.
Though. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's just like, it's so tough because there's so many non-basketball things that affect his free agency in ways they just don't touch anybody else's we're going to talk about.
I understand why they would pay him, but I would say that we need to stop tricking ourselves into thinking that the Warriors are going to do anything other than just float around the middle. If that's just where they're at. I'm not advocating for them to let Thompson walk.
Yeah.
They seem very hesitant to make the big time swing on the trade market. If they're so concerned about pinching pennies, are they going to be willing to even make a big swing on the trade market while paying Klay Thompson. I honestly don't know. I'm going to be fascinated to see where his contract lands. That gives us or brings us to the Houston Rockets, who have no, like, they're going to pick up Jayshawn Tate's team option. That's not a difficult decision. So I'm looking at the non-guarantees for them because which is Jock Landale and Jeff Green. Jeff Green actually played some minutes for them, did some backup five stuff. I think I would guarantee both of them, but I think Jock Landale's the tougher decision because he's not someone, especially with the emergences and improvement from Alperen Sengun and Jabari Smith Jr. profiles as someone who's going to play. However, you look at just having that salary number on your books because you're not going to be this massive cap space team. Just keep the $8 million slot so that you can use it in a trade if you want to make that push. You don't really have to worry about a roster spot crunch right now and looking at your own draft pick commitments. And so I would guarantee him, but it is kind of a decision where, well, would we rather just keep that roster spot open rather than, are they going to, if it's one thing if you're using it in a trade immediately, but if that's something you're kind of kicking the can down until the deadline, are you going to guarantee it? It's a very small decision in the grand scheme, but I would in the end guarantee both Jeff Green and Jock Landale just because those are contracts that could help you in trade talks. And they also just, because they come off the books after next year, they fit with your squeaky clean 2025 cap sheet, which that itself is pending because both Alperen Sengun and Jalen Green are currently extension eligible. So maybe they're on the books for more money than their cap holds right now. But it's such a low stakes decision for Houston. But I think I land at the point of, I mean, when you look at some of the other guys who could be traded, they don't make a ton of money. And so it's, if you're going to include like even and also some of the guys are just so important, but like, unless you're doing Steven Adams as that guy, I guess Jayshawn Tate, but he's only at 7.1 million. And then Tari Eason, probably not someone, if he's healthy, that you want to move anyway. That's only 3.7. And then it's okay. Well, it's Fred VanVleet and it's Dillon Brooks. Those are the only players that are on the books for more than $15 million next season, Grant. I don't know if you knew about the Rockets. You have two players earning more than 50. I'm sure neither of them are untouchable, but when you're just talking about building these trade packages, it just feels, it makes sense to have both Jeff Green and Jock Landale in your back pocket to me.
Yeah, I think that's right. Just because as you're talking, I'm looking down their salary list for like, okay, what are some numbers that they could flip if they let this, the 9.6 for Green and the 8 for Landale come off the books. It's like, okay, all right, somebody's at 9.7. Oh, that's Jabari Smith Jr. Okay, that's not tradable salary. That's like a cornerstone piece. Oh, 9.2. Okay, that you can put that together with a pick and some other salary and get like a $15 million guy. Oh, that's Amen Thompson. It's like, forget it. Like, there's just, you need those guys, or one of them at least, for that reason. So yeah, another low stakes.
If you're attaching, let's use Jalen Green as an example. You want someone who's making at least a little bit. You need someone or someones who are making those mid-level salaries so that you can step out of your way because you're not trading Jalen Green for someone who's on a super cheap deal. You're presumably making that trade because you're getting a star who's making over $20 million. So you need to get to that number somehow.
Yeah. All right. That takes me takes it back to me. And we are on the Indiana Pacers here. I went with Pascal Siakam, not because I think there's any real intrigue or drama about maybe anything as we get deeper into this, but about him leaving, about another team signing him away. It's just like we talked about this, I guess, with probably OG Anunoby the other day. So there's the 5-year, $247-ish million dollar deal that Indiana can offer. To me, that should probably, I wouldn't do that because you don't have to. But Indy can also offer about 4 for 190. These will be slightly different than I think the numbers we discussed for OG, but these are close enough. Versus another team can go 4 for about 183. So Indiana can just have the best offer, full stop, no matter what. And I'd be okay with him at 4 for 190, just because no muss, no fuss. We move on. Like, this was a foregone conclusion when we traded for him. It's just a question of I don't know. Do they even need to go that high? Is there going to be a 4-year offer from another team out there that pushes them to go all the way on a 4-year deal, or even, I don't know.
I don't love this fit, but if it was a matter of trying to get Indy to pay the most and they would have to optimize I wouldn't mind OKC making a run, creating some additional cap space. I don't love the fit, but let's just put pressure on someone else. He would be playing next to Chet Holmgren. Super interesting.
Yeah, I think OKC is going to loom pretty often here as a team. Well, I mean, there's not a ton of situations like Siakam, but anytime there's a someone needs a leverage play, the representation has to come back to the Pacers in this case and say, like, I mean, we got this offer from OKC that it's the full boat for 4 years. You guys have got to at least go, 4 for 190, and I don't know, give us like a guaranteed parking spot or like something. They're just going to use the Thunder as leverage because the Thunder are the scariest. We could fuck around if you really want us to team this off season, but other than that, like, the Pacers have a couple other things to think about. What Obi Toppin's restricted. TJ McConnell has a non-guarantee, which like you'll definitely bring him back at 9.3. But
that's more of an extension situation. Like,
right. Yeah. What do we give him 30 million a year based on so far in the postseason? Got to think about it.
So I think there's a chance Toppin could end up being the more tough decision because if Pascal Siakam's market's just the 4-year max, it's done and done. I'm curious though your thoughts on, and maybe this would be the option that makes it difficult. Would you be willing to? So a 5-year deal takes him through his age 34 season. If you're lowering the average annual value, would you consider going to that 5th year? And I don't know how much you need to lower it, but is it like, because if you're going to go the full boat route over 5 years, you're looking at 245, about 245 million. It's a little bit more than that. It's like, would you do like 5 and 225 or something, like just to lower or is that just not enough of a shaving off the top? Because I can't imagine 5 for 200, it guarantees him like a good amount of money. But if you could get a 4 for 190, why would you sign like a 5 for 200 type? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, so what let's game it out, like what you gain from Indiana's perspective, because they're the ones that you'd have to like twist their arm to do maybe I don't know, maybe they think just the 5th year on it would be worth going to 247 for whatever reason. I just think that's based on the idea that he's more valuable as a trade chip because he's under contract for longer, which is always the way we used to evaluate longer term deals, is like, well, this guy's worth 4 first rounders because he's got 4 years left, and this guy's got only 2 years left, so you can't give up as much in return because he may leave, and it's not a rental, but it's not like this guy's on the books for half a decade or whatever. I'm not sure there's enough of a payoff in terms of like preserved trade value because of his age to justify a 5th year if you don't have to do it. And Indiana doesn't have to do it. So like, because if you're Siakam and you're offered 5 for 2, what'd you say, 225 or 215 or something, then it's like, well, wouldn't I rather get back to free agency 1 year earlier and assume I can make up that difference and more?
There's also the options of he signed shorter term to then go back into free agency and capitalize on the 10-year max, because this was his 8th season, I believe. And so he's like, right.
What if it's a 2+1, or we haven't even talked about a 2+1 or a 3+1 or something like that.
I would argue that might almost benefit Indy because it just gives them more time. Like, because if things really don't pan out, or if you start to see him on the decline, it's okay. This contract's now at least a year shorter.
Right.
And then if he's playing really well, you're probably, okay, we'll worry about if we have to pay him more when the time comes.
And from his perspective, that's like a bet on yourself thing, which, given the hyper confidence of all these guys, is not like the most outlandish, hypothetical. Let's move to the Clippers though. That's your team.
So it's between James Harden or Paul George. And I picked Paul George, who has a player option, just because he has a market that James Harden does not. I don't know what team. I think figuring out James Harden's number is going to be a difficult proposition, but where is the leverage coming from that pigeonholes you into number X when you're looking at the cap? Like, certainly not Philly. So it's just like, where I don't see any outside forces pressuring the Clippers in any way. And this also feels like something they probably hammered out before they ever traded for him. And so I look at Paul George and still has yet to sign an extension. If he opts out, he can sign a 4-year max. That is worth a boatload of money. It's 4 years and $221.1 million roughly. Do you just give him that when you didn't give Kawhi Leonard like that full boat type? Like, he decided to extend and Paul George did not. And so you kind of saved it. You added a year of flexibility because you weren't committed to him for as long. But are you really going to let him walk or trade him for minimal return? Because it doesn't, at this point, it's like, I don't know how much money they're actually haggling over, because like the years are set because of the over 38. Where like he can go up to this. And it really probably shouldn't be difficult. But now that you've gotten to a point where he could very easily just reach free agency and maybe doesn't sign an extension, it is super difficult. And I'm kind of at the point where, okay, you could, in theory, save a bunch of money if you let him walk, but like you have Kawhi Leonard, you're going to resign James Harden, you're going to be in the second apron probably anyway, even if you let Paul George walk for nothing. And here's the thing, you can't let him walk for nothing because yes, you might have some first round equity to trade, but the trade restrictions are punitive. And it feels like this shouldn't be difficult, but because he hasn't extended yet, it seems like it's going to be.
That's my question here. It's clearly, you're right. It's clearly Paul George. What do you make of Kawhi extending and Paul George not? Like, because there's two ways to go, I think, which is like the Clippers offered a similar extension and Paul George said no, or they didn't offer a similar extension. And
which is like, what are they? I'm very, if they're, yeah, the Kawhi stuff just feels like this is where he really wants to be. We know that because of how he got there. And so he just decided, he knows his own injury history. And so he just decided, yeah, this might be more franchise friendly than, but I'm still like, it was like so close. It wasn't the maximum number of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms you're sacrificing money, but like it was close enough to what would have been his max salary that it's okay. What was the concession really there? I want to know what the actual issue is with Paul. Like, how much money are the Clippers trying to sign him below the max?
That's what I mean. Like, so does it mean that that Paul George views himself as more valuable than Kawhi Leonard on the open market? And then get into the whole question of like, well, is that actually true? I don't know. You could make a case, I guess. Or do the Clippers clearly think he's worth less than Kawhi Leonard, which is like another one. Yeah, you can make that case even with Kawhi's unavailability. The ceiling is still just higher than Paul George's in terms of what you get with Kawhi Leonard, theoretically, if he's healthy. It's fascinating. It just seemed like I thought for sure once Kawhi signed the extension, it's like we'll get an identical one for George, and like
Same.
and end of conversation. We don't have to think about this. It's just I'll be fascinated in the wake of him signing someplace when all the details come out about like how the whole extension thing shook out with the Clippers.
On to the Los Angeles Lakers, where there's really only one option, because Darvin Ham is gone, so it's not going to be Taurean Prince. Like, how do we figure out how to max him out? Type deal. It's D'Angelo Russell, and he has a player option, which everyone expects him to decline. And now, if you've never watched D'Angelo Russell before, you might think he's in line to make quite a bit of money this season, but the D'Angelo Russell experience is such that he tantalizes you sometimes for long stretches at a time, only to not come through when it matters most. And that was the track he followed this season, albeit in a flashier manner, because he was so good for them for most of the regular season. It never should have been, well, he's so good. Like, we don't really need Donovan Mitchell or Trae Young here. Like, we're good. We're good. We got D'Lo. However, if he's going to opt out, you're not in the bet. Like, you do have other salary matching tools for trades. I'm looking at, and maybe you feel differently. I'm looking at him purely as a player to be traded from the Lakers, and you want to preserve that asset. It's not, I guess, in the disaster scenario of Donovan for the Lakers, not a disaster scenario in a vacuum. Let's say Donovan Mitchell signs the extension, and then it's, well, we're not going to have the best offer for Trae Young, or the Hawks decide not to move him. We don't think DeJounte Murray's high enough end. I don't really love Darius Garland for this team. But so if you can't get a lead guard, then D'Angelo Russell becomes important to you. But the fact that you're on the hunt for a lead guard speaks to the actual importance of D'Angelo Russell to you. Right. What is the number you come in at then? His cap hold is going to be almost $26 million if he opts out. They do have room, assuming he opts out and they're not going to carry his cap hold. They have a ton of room beneath the luxury tax, almost $30 million. That doesn't necessarily matter as much when you're a LeBron James team and operating on his window. But it's in a weird spot where it's, well, you can't afford to lose him necessarily for nothing, but maybe you can, because unless it's a sign and trade, you're not going to be able to move him right away. And you need his cooperation in a sign and trade, not just a team to be interested in him. And when you do have other salary matching tools, like a Jared Vanderbilt, like a Gabe Vincent, like a Rui Hachimura, is it that important to roll over D'Lo's salary slot? Especially if, doesn't it get harder if you know you're going to go out and acquire guard X to make that decision? Or maybe it doesn't, because if you know that, oh, well, we had to include Gabe Vincent and Austin Reeves in that deal for Trae Young, like, we might as well just keep D'Angelo Russell anyway. This is my incoherent, rambling way of saying it feels like this could go in so many different directions. And to top it all off, before I throw it to you, I don't know which team is going to come in and make the Lakers pay through the teeth for D'Angelo Russell. Maybe it's because it's the Lakers, we see some gamesmanship from another team, which I'd be all in favor of. If Orlando was just like, we know that they're going to he's going to go back to them and we're going to force them to pay $21 million a year for 3 years for D'Angelo Russell or something.
Did you say specifically whether you thought he would decline his player option or not?
I think he will, just because I think he's in a position to guarantee himself even if he ends up signing 3 for 45, like you've guaranteed yourself quite a bit of money then.
I agree. I think he will too. I just you get just a little bit of pause thinking about like, well, who really is going to come in and start him at a number that's close to his 18, or I guess his cap holds 20, almost 26. I don't think anybody's coming in with an offer starting there. But yeah, like I guess I would say, in answer to one of the questions you asked, I only ever view D'Angelo Russell as a salary to be traded. Like I don't really ever view him as someone that's like a little bit, a little hyperbolic, but yeah, from the Lakers perspective, it is a really interesting dynamic that they need a lead guard, and getting D'Angelo Russell back on the roster so that he can be traded is very important in acquiring a lead guard, because that lead guard is not D'Angelo Russell. I just like, I don't see how anyone is like, even LeBron James, we should mention, has a player option, but like all indications are the Lakers will do whatever he wants in terms of contract years and dollars. And that's not going to be remotely dramatic, odds are. So that is like a higher profile situation. It's just, I don't feel like that is not a tough decision. I don't think, like, for really anybody on either side of it.
The next team is the Memphis Grizzlies. Really only one option here, unless you think that, and we already know he's going back to Japan, so it's not Yuta Watanabe here. Luke Kennard has a team option for about 14.7, 14.8 million. Memphis, if you remove that team option, and we're talking about a franchise that is going to be cost conscious. I think we can all agree. They're about $7 to $8, maybe $9 million under the luxury tax, depending on some other decisions. So if you pick up Kennard's team option, you are just automatically a tax team, unless you're doing any other cost cutting maneuvers. And then you get into, where's the cost cutting coming from if you don't have, like, if it's like, are you trading, just dumping Zaire Williams and his $6 million? Like, because you're not going to trade Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. It seems like they're pretty married to Marcus Smart. Do you look at dumping Brandon Clark? Looming over all this, though, is this team, shout out to Gigi Jackson, making all rookie second team. He didn't make first team, right? Yeah, he was second team. So you still need a wing. You kind of need to at least add one other big, and that's going to maybe rise to 2 if Brandon Clark ends up being moved in some type of salary dump. At the same time, you're not nearly a good enough shooting team in terms of volume or efficiency yet. Just say, well, we don't need Luke Kennard's motion shooting. I would argue that you do. However, we're talking about another season where he's playing in less than half of it. He has all these sorts of lower body injuries, basically around the knees. I don't know what you do there. I mean, this is not my money. I'd pick up the team option because I think that he's a super useful piece to a team that has contending aspirations when it's at full strength. But if Memphis is concerned about either preserving access to the full mid-level exception or just ducking the tax entirely, which I don't think should be the goal, but I'm sure that they have scenarios mapped out in which that probably is the goal. If I'm being honest, they probably don't want to be a tax team next year. And I get it from the stance of, okay, well, Jaren Jackson's eventually going to be earning more. We have a bunch of years left on that Desmond Bane extension. John Morant's eventually going to have a new contract. Still, I would keep him. I don't know if they do because of the injuries and the prospective tax situation.
This is a true tough decision because there's arguments to be made on both sides, and you laid them out. I think my gut is that they will keep him, if only because maybe you can because a healthy version of Luke Kennard really helps this team. Like that's kind of always true. It's just, you don't get the healthy version basically ever. And 2, because again, like, you're just preserving the asset. We can flip him for something. If you want to cut money, down the line, trade him for somebody cheaper or whatever.
That's something we should mention because we mention it Hammer Home all the time. They might enter next season in the tax, but like, if they decide, that's I think why you keep them too. If you need to get out of the want to do it at the trade deadline, then I know it's harder to find those cost-cutting maneuvers, but his salary is like mid-level-y enough to where you could probably do it.
I think that's right. That feels like the truest tough decision we've had so far, and we're halfway through. So I don't know, maybe there aren't really any difficult ones. I have the Miami Heat next here. So I initially had Haywood Highsmith here just because I was, there's a bunch of guys with player options that like, well, is that really free agency? I'm going to pivot here. Highsmith is an unrestricted free agent. I think he's valuable to the Heat. His cap hold is like $2 million. So he was my initial pick. I think it's probably Caleb Martin with a player option for about 7.1 million. Of the guy, and there are several. Kevin Love has a player option, Josh Richardson, Thomas Bryant. To me, Martin is the guy of that group that's clearly like, I mean, he's started playoff games for them and has been, in the finals was a huge piece. I just like, I wonder if the Heat are of the mind that like, well, we don't need this guy. We can find the next Caleb Martin. We can build him out of whatever. Maybe that next guy is Haywood Highsmith, who will bring back on another minimum, and he suddenly is like a $10 million player. The Heat don't have a ton to do here, small scale. The bigger issues are obviously like the Jimmy Butler extension or lack thereof, a potential Donovan Mitchell trade, like all kinds of stuff. What do we do with Tyler Hero? That's a movable salary. The Heat are flush with movable numbers, by the way. It's just a question of like, does anybody want Tyler Hero at that rate? Separate issue. But do you agree that it's Martin versus Highsmith, even though Highsmith is actually going to be a free agent no matter what? I think Martin is too. I don't think.
Yeah, I would just, because he seems like such a formality to decline his player option. That is someone who, another guy that I don't think you can name a team that it doesn't make sense that has cap space to go after him. And even if you have your mid level, like that feels like his floor, right? Is the $12.4 million MLE?
I guess probably so. I struggle with the idea that, well, I mean, do the Heat go that high? That's the question. I mean, I guess maybe, but they have so many it feels like they have so many other things to consider that like devoting 15 million or whatever it ends up being, or just the mid-level to Martin is mid-level money.
They have, if you take his player option out of the equation, like they're a lot closer to the second apron than I think people realize. They're inside 15 million without, that's assuming Kevin Love picks up his player option. That's without like, okay, what do we pay Caleb? Like if you give him the mid-level money, 12.4 million, like that eats up all your flexibility below the second apron. And oh, by the way, that's not including bringing back Thomas Bryant or Josh Richardson's injured, but it's, and that's not including paying Haywood Highsmith, who you just mentioned.
Yeah, right. So it's amazing. Like it gets them right to, I don't know if you said this, like right to 190 if you give 15 million to Caleb Martin, and that's not including guys on minimums for some of those other roster spots. So like that's, you're second aproning real hard, pretty much, like probably no matter what. So maybe it's not that hard of a decision on Martin, but
and maybe because he had an offensive down year, I think that's another tough decision for them, because I don't think that they're going to want to pay that much for a team that clearly isn't ready to contend as currently constructed. But if you lose Caleb Martin, I would argue that you're a significantly worse team. I guess having Nikola Jovic and Jaime Jaquez helps you weather that a little bit, but I mean,
yeah. All right, that's it's back to me again. I have the Milwaukee Bucks, just a trove of like high value, high leverage decisions to make here. When I initially put this together, the question was Beverly or Beasley, and that was before Patrick Beverly played aggressive catch with fans in the stands.
Aggressive catch.
That's what.
Are you doing PR for Patrick Beverly?
Yeah, it was an aggressive catch. He was just trying to involve the fans. And so Beverly seems like he's not coming back. But then really for anybody, there are several other guys who played for minimums that are free agents. That includes Jay Crowder, Thanasis. Didn't he tear his Achilles, Thanasis, recently? So, I mean, he'll still get the minimum probably. And then Beasley, Beverly are the other guys. It's like, I don't know, is it a tough decision to offer the only thing you can, which is the minimum, to those guys and hope somebody takes it? Like what decision?
They can offer Malik Beasley 120% raise.
Okay. All right. Sorry. So he might make $3 million or whatever it is.
No, he's gone. He's gone.
He's someone to get mid-level money, right? Maybe not mid-level, but he'll get he could get a 4 for 40, 4 for 50.
Even someone will give him the mini MLE. I would probably give him a short-term, like full MLE if I have it. Just the shooting itself would be monstrous. But he's not going to be in Milwaukee. So there's really no decision there for them. Also, all their free agents decisions, maybe with the exception of Jay Crowder, really aren't their own.
That's what I mean. Like we're seeing here with Milwaukee, I think the truest or the most profound like impact of the second apron already, where it's just like,
because they don't have the bird rights on some of these guys. They have it on Jay Crowder. So there's that. But that might be the decision where it's, well, do we like, they could probably get Jay Crowder back for the money. Well, they can offer, if you could get Jay Crowder back for a very small number, you would probably just do it to preserve the depth. But you do maybe now have to game this and be like, do we give Jay Crowder more than anyone should be giving Jay Crowder just so that we can have a tradable slot? Or do they view it as like, well, we have Pat Connaughton's money? Like, and you put it at the same time, it's like, that's so low. And when you can't aggregate, that's going to be an issue you run into. So it might be Jay Crowder for me. I think it's just their toughest decision is, well, how do we best deploy the resources we like, the scant few resources that we actually have at our disposal.
I love it. No, that's so. What can they do with Crowder? They go? They don't
have his bird because he signed a deal off a previous one. It was for a lower number, so they should have his bird rights unless for some reason they renounced them last season and I didn't see it. So you could give Crowder, say they wanted to pay him mid-level. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you can max out Jay Crowder if you wanted to. If I'm mistaken, someone could correct me, but I am pretty on top of this stuff normally.
Yeah, so, yeah. No, that makes it clearer that Jay Crowder is the guy, because everybody else, like you said, it's like, it's not your decision, Bucks. You're not deciding anything. It's just like you put the offer out there for the minimum or 120% of the minimum, and either guys accept it or don't.
You could say that Patrick Beverley's a decision in the sense that he would probably come back, because I don't know what team is going to offer him more, but now you're dealing with, okay, he's also suspended to start the year, so that becomes a decision. But if they want to do anything on the trade market, because they will have a first-round pick to dangle at the deadline or over this offseason technically, and you don't think Pat Connaughton's, what is his number going to be, at $9 million next season? He's at 9.4.
Yeah.
That might be big enough for them to say, okay, like, we're not going to, really fuck with the Jay Crowder number, but it is 9.4 doesn't even get you Alex Caruso, I don't think. So, like, if you like, that's the name you're staring at next deadline. Is just an example. That's how hard it is when you're going to be a second apron team.
All right, talk to me about Minnesota.
We have done something that no other podcast, any podcast has been able to do. We found a way to talk about the Timberwolves' financial situation during the Western Conference Finals. We really should. I'm not going to pat myself on the back because I'm just so amped. I might dislocate my shoulder by complimenting us too much. No one else is doing this. It comes down to Kyle Anderson or Monte Morris, and I've jostled back and forth more on this during the playoffs because both of them are averaging under 12 minutes per game. Kyle Anderson is playing slightly more than he is. I landed with Kyle Anderson because I think that backup point guard's a bigger need for them, but it feels like he is someone who will have more of a market than Monte Morris. And just sitting here right now, no moves, just penciling in the requisite cap holds here, not including Monte Morris and Kyle Anderson, the Timberwolves will wake up in the new calendar year like $500,000 away from being a second apron team. So they're a second apron team. What are you doing? I think you can argue that, is Kyle Anderson more expendable to them because you have Naz Reid, you have Rudy Gobert, you have Karl Anthony Towns, maybe Leonard Miller pops, that like they give him some run next year? Or is it, well, is that a salary slot that we need to preserve? Because when you look at these other, if we're going to pay through the teeth and do this for a year or two, we're not going to move a Jaden McDaniels or a Karl Anthony Towns then. And we don't have all these other just mid-rung type of salary. Like everyone is like their salary is very allocated towards the top of their roster. You have Rudy Gobert, you have the Anthony Edwards extensions kicking in, Karl Anthony Towns extension kicking in, Jaden McDaniels extension kicking in. And it's like, we're moving Mike Conley when he's making under $10 million a year would be just fucking stupid.
Yeah.
We have Naz Reid. Okay, that's a number we could move, but do you view Naz Reid as expendable? And then is there like a protest in the city of Minnesota if you decide to move Naz Reid? Like, he doesn't feel like someone they could ever trade. So I settled on Kyle Anderson, but you could talk me into Monte Morris. But either one of them, and certainly both of them, if you want to look at it as, they can pay both. Will they? I would guess. I think it's what's more likely, they let both walk or they bring back both Kyle Anderson and Monte Morris?
Probably bringing back both would be a surprise. So I guess it's got to be more likely that they let both walk. I really go back and forth too. I guess it's weird because, like, if you're just viewing whichever of the two, let's say they bring one back as like, oh, this is a salary slot we're trying to preserve, or for whatever reason, we're in the second apron anyway, so whatever. Not like letting both go doesn't like take us out of that status because we'll sign someone for the minimum and then we're over anyway. I just keep thinking about Mike Conley being 36, and it's actually closer to 37 now, and just like, I don't know that Monte Morris is the guy that you're like, oh, good, we have him. When Mike Conley misses a month, like, we're okay. But the position, I would say, is the one where like things could go sideways. Whereas like if Kyle Anderson's hurt, you still have the other three bigs. You still have McDaniels that can play the four, whatever. So like from just who matters more to the team, it might be Morris, and that might make him the one that you bring back. Like, even though I think Kyle Anderson is probably just a better player or has shown to be a better player at times. But yeah, I think that I'm so nervous about what happens to them without Conley, and you should just assume you will be without him for a stretch next year or more because of his age. Like that's got to be priced in. So
I really want Kyle Lowry to sign with the Timberwolves on a minimum contract. If anyone cares about what one thing I want to happen, or that or Denver. I'd love to see Kyle Lowry on one of those teams as their backup point.
Or he'll just be back in Philly, right?
Like, well, that's probably the most likely outcome, especially they might need to pay him just because they can't send their cap space everywhere. We're sticking with me and the New Orleans Pelicans. They are like between $14 and $15 million underneath the tax when you're looking at next year. That does not include a new contract for Jonas Valanciunas, and it does not include what Najee Marshall should be worth on the open market. So I think the decision, it's Jonas Valanciunas for me, because I know that the reporting is he's just going to leave, and that might be what happens. But okay, now what are you doing? Is it you're just going to sign a big off the scrap heap or run it back with Cody Zeller and then a lot of Larry Nance Jr.? Do we see more Zion at the 5? What does that do to the physical toll that's already extracted on him when you look at all his injury history? And like losing that salary slot becomes a big deal for you too, because it's okay if you're willing to move Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum, and perhaps that's why it's not as big of a deal to just lose Valanciunas as it would be for other teams who want to preserve the salary slot, because you have money to make trades. But when you're also talking about moving what are right now core pieces of your team to do so, you lack sort of the mid-end expendable salaries where it's okay. Larry Nance at 11 is right there, but like you're not moving Herb Jones. That's stupid. Do you count Dyson Daniels at only 6.1? And also just like, hey, it'd be nice to have an above average center on this roster, and that you're not going to replicate that on the open market when you look at the names who are available. So I understand why you wouldn't want to pay him with the intention of keeping him. Is this a sign and trade situation? We know I will believe the Pelicans pay the tax when I see it. Their fans have told us many times, well, they said they were going to pay the tax. When they do, I will believe that they have paid the tax. I think people are making it out to be an easier decision than it actually is. Like Jonas Valanciunas in a vacuum for a team that just doesn't have, yes, they can make trades, but making trades then costs you assets as well. So you'd be losing Jonas Valanciunas, losing other players and picks. I don't think it's as easy of a decision. And then just very quickly, I wonder how much Najee Marshall gets. Like, are they the team that's going to pay him too, especially if they bring back Valanciunas and are either in the tax or very close to it at that point?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because you led with Marshall to some extent. Like, he's going to get certainly more than the mini MLE, right? Like he's more than a $5 million player. I don't think he's a full MLE guy, maybe. Although, like, I wouldn't stun me if he got close to like a full MLE level starting salary. But with Valanciunas, like, for sure, he seemed like this guy's a goner. Like the only thing we know about the Pelicans is that they need an upgrade at center. Like, that's all anyone ever talks about. Kind of true. Valanciunas, you said above average. Like, he's above average at a lot of things. I think everyone would agree that, like, he's not the guy getting New Orleans to the next level. So sure, he's like clearly gone. And then you just start thinking about like, well, one, who's going to pay him more than say like the 15 he made this past year? I'm not sure. And then there may be a scenario where New Orleans actually gets to bring him back at a lower number, potentially. Like, if you could go, I don't know, like 3 years, 40 or something like that. Like, and then he's like more tradable at that number down the line. Or like, the idea of him coming back, which seemed like just totally not worth considering, is now suddenly seems like, I don't know if it's likely, but it's like on the table and then some, right? Like, which is just not where you thought you'd be.
No. And so I think it's part of a larger thing that they have to figure out. But again, if you just say, well, they're going to move Brandon Ingram anyway and break him up into multiple players, and it's okay, but you already needed to add shooting if you're going to use that vehicle. And now you need to make sure that you're also getting a big back as part of that. And okay, by the way, he was the closest thing you had to an actual co-star when you're looking offensively. It's just, that's not CJ McCollum anymore if it ever was. And like Trey Murphy is not, I don't think he's in line to make like a leap where it's like, look at Trey Murphy's like really running things and creating all this stuff from scratch. So you also have to factor that in to the equation.
All right. I've got the Knicks here. We've talked about this actually quite a bit on the previous podcast we did, so we don't need to go nuts on it. I have Anunoby. It's kind of the same
Ooh,
exact analysis as Siakam, where it's just like the Knicks don't have to go 5 years; they can go for 4. And I have the numbers here. I don't. I know we
it's the
talked about
same.
it.
It's the same as the Siakam
So like
thing.
183 or what 182 versus
Yeah.
189 or 190. But talking about what the Knicks can offer over 4 years versus another team, and the Knicks have that 5th year they can go to if they want to. Again, like actually, maybe just this as a thought exercise. Would you rather give OG the 5th year or Siakam? I think it's OG to me, even with the injury stuff.
It's probably OG, but I think it's more of a discussion than
It is, but I also think you probably your hypothetical of Siakam for like 5 years in like 20 something, like that feels more likely for Anunoby, like as opposed to Siakam. If you offered 5 years 220 something, he'd be like, how about 247 or just give me the 4-year max. I think Anunoby, there's a little more wiggle room there. If it's not him though, since we kind of already discussed sort of what you're weighing with the Siakam decision, I mean, Isaiah Hartenstein, we talked about it, like 4 years. The Knicks can only go 4 years, like 72. Was that it? Or
72 and a
72?
half. Yeah.
72 and a half. It's not crazy that another team can come over the top. And it's like,
It's tough to spot that team, which is why I guess I was like shocked you picked Anunoby, but then we had outlined this in the previous podcast. Well, if you just give Hartenstein quote unquote the max that you can give him, so now all of a sudden you have $30 million wrapped up in your primary center rotation per year with him and Mitchell Robinson. Not a big deal.
yeah.
And it's easier to spot teams that would come in and maybe force it. Like we're OG, if he gets a bunch of 4-year max offers from OKC, should be on it. Philly should be. Everyone that has cap space really or needs to carve out more should just be on it. San Antonio should be on it. Like match him and Wemby on the same team. That'd be fun. But like if he has those offers, does that give him the leverage to get a 5th year? Not the 5th year. If they sign him to a 5-year max, I'll be flabbergasted. But the leverage to be like, hey, like you know how we talk about the 5 years and 225 for Pascal Siakam? OG kind of looking at his past injuries might say like, yeah, just give me the extra year of security. It'll be sub max, but it's close enough to where like you meet in the middle of it or whatever.
Yeah. I think that is more likely for him. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. We'll just use OG since we're talking about him. If he's got, 2 or 3 offers of the 4 years, 183, I mean, and he says, let's go 5th year Knicks. Did the Knicks just go 4 for 190? Like that's still, you're just going to not take $7 million to spite us and sign somewhere else that like odds are you won't fit as well. Cause we were awesome with you. Like, and you're in New York. Like it's just, I think it's still more likely that he gets a 5th year than Siakam, but the Knicks like really don't have to. Like I think if he got a 5th year, I bet we would view it as like, good job, Knicks. Cause
it was like
got
5 for 200 or something like that.
Yeah, you got the number down by offering.
Well, that we did entertain the idea that because he's a non-superstar, that could we get and the term I use reverse sticker shock, sort of where it's wow, I can't believe how much that guy didn't get.
Maybe. I just think it felt to me like the 4-year max was just like that's just probably what's going to happen.
I would agree, but I'm just saying because teams are like the reality of this. And by the way, that's the other part of this is you could have picked Bojan Bogdanovic as partial guarantee. He's guaranteed $2 million. But if you assume that OG Anunoby is getting the max at 42.3, and then you're penciling in Isaiah Hartenstein for, again, his quote unquote max that he can get from the Knicks, well, like, all right.
That's second apron territory.
That is, you're very close to second apron territory. I mean, you're actually, yeah, you're probably in second apron territory there, just looking at, yeah, I mean, you're awfully, but that's if you guarantee Bogdanovic's deal. So you could stay out of the second apron if you then if you waive him. But the whole point of getting him, aside from hoping he was going to help you and then he gets injured and wasn't really being utilized in the first place, was, well, we want this empty salary filler to go out and make the bigger move. If you get rid of him, now you're in a position to where anything you do has to cost Julius Randle, has to cost Mitchell Robinson. Maybe you even need to dip into the Villanova core, Josh Hart or Dante DiVincenzo. So that's where things get iffy. And OG Anunoby's deal, because I think that Hartenstein, if he comes back and it's less than what the max allowable they can give him, that would be, it just doesn't feel as critical to like, oh, we're paying OG Anunoby $40+ million a year. That's really going to impact your books long-term more than whatever happens with Isaiah Hartenstein was my point.
I think that's right. And we should mention that, talking about, oh my God, like the proximity to the second apron, just depending on some of the variables, I think that presumes like Alec Burks they renounce his rights. He's gone. And even like Precious Achua, who's restricted, might just be like, nope, we're good. You can go sign. I mean, like,
because
otherwise,
if you max, if you let's pencil in Anunoby for a max right
okay.
now. You're like, I don't know, like $15 million away from the second apron, 15 to 16 away from the second apron. Mm-hmm. That is basically what Isaiah Hartenstein's salary would be.
Right. Yeah. I think it's good that you mentioned like Randall, maybe some wiggle room. I don't know how you're trading him to like cut a bunch of money potentially, but between Bogdanovich and Randall, you do have like, there's a way to get out of that second apron with OG and Hartenstein on like top numbers. But no matter what, some of these guys that played like real minutes in these playoffs are just going to have to be gone. Like that's non-negotiable.
I think they could view it as waive Bogdanovich and then your trade offer, assuming someone is making a ton of money, it becomes instead of Randall and Bojan Bogdanovic, it's Randall and Mitchell Robinson. Mm-hmm. That's not the worst place to be, but it's not exactly a comforting, but because like Bogdanovich, even though he could be useful, is just like this empty like salary slot. Like you can plan moving forward without him. You can't do the same. You can't necessarily do the same. Even if you think they're better off without Randall, it's a decision. It depends on who's coming back. But now it's okay. Now we have no safety net behind Hartenstein or in front of Hartenstein, depending on how you expect the rotation to run.
Yeah. All right. You have the powerhouse offseason juggernaut Thunder.
Who have, I mean, I thought if you would have had me do this exercise, like at the trade deadline, I would have easily said that it was Gordon Hayward. Like, oh, should they bring him back? I think it's Isaiah Joe's team option, just in the sense of because you have, like, you're still in this grace period of, okay, yes, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's on a max, but J-Dub and Chet Holmgren aren't there. Josh Giddey's only extension eligible. Who knows if they even pay him? Do you just decline his team option? And you do that with the intention of, we already know we're going to agree to this deal with him. So you give him the automatic raise at a time when you still could have cap space. They can get past $35 million in cap space without kind of breaking a sweat here. Or do you want to use that cap space and the appeal of having Isaiah Joe on this cut rate market? Like we want to roll that over another year and we'll let him become an unrestricted free agent in 2025. And we'll decide whether we want to pay him then. I think what's good about this is it's entirely the Thunder's decision. You don't decline his team option unless you know that he is going to re-sign. But it is, at least when you're trying to map out your long-term future, figuring out when to pay him. It's not as much of an if, because I think he is valuable. They could make trades that would devalue his utility to the team. But as of right now, it's them deciding when they want to pay him. And I kind of feel like they're going to go the route of this offseason, but they were so good that maybe the stakes have been raised a little bit. I still view it as the cap space is not going to be the primary vehicle through which they improve anyway. The free agency market is, unless you are going to poach OG, it's not really going to yield the answer for you. And yes, you'd like some flexibility in trades to take back more money, but you can re-sign Isaiah Joe and still kind of have this like $15 million, $20 million in wiggle room, depending on some other decisions. And again, that doesn't include any other outgoing salary that you could actually use to match.
Yeah, I guess my gut is that, or my gut reaction to them declining his team option would be disappointment, because that would indicate that they're maybe not going to go get somebody exciting. They could time it differently.
His cap hold is so low that you can basically preserve your cap space by you decline his team option. You have this small cap hold. And so we still have, but does it mean that they're actually going to use their cap space and then go back and pay him? That's certainly a fair question.
That's true. Like, it wouldn't necessarily mean they're not going to try to use that full 33-ish or more, depending on some other things. But it feels like it would angle that way a little bit. I don't know, but there just aren't any other choices on this roster. It's got to be Isaiah.
But it does build a goodwill too, though, because if you just let him hit unrestricted free agency, next year, I'm not saying he's definitely gone, but you might have to pay a higher premium just because, well, you made me wait another year before actually paying me.
So I have the Orlando Magic next. And when we put this together, I just copped out because I didn't want to pick an actual player on their team as their toughest free agent decision. And I chose the question being, which free agent guard will they sign? And which is really that is the question for them this summer. But in keeping with the spirit of the exercise, I think it really probably comes down to, it's just between Gary Harris and Markelle Fultz. And of the two, I guess Gary Harris is the guy that you would
just probably. Who's giving Markelle Fultz money?
No, nobody. I mean, he'll get backup point guard money from somewhere. Like he'll play. It's just he's going to be to me, purely a backup someplace. Gary Harris is still like also a backup, but if you're the Magic and your issues are we need spacing, we need shooting, we need like that's just Gary Harris matters more. Coming off a $13 million salary, Fultz, just for reference, made 17 last year.
I would predict Fultz gets less in his next deal unless it's like a 1-year contract.
I think Fultz will get less than Gary Harris. Like that.
Do you think Gary Harris gets more than just because he finished the season injured again?
Yeah, but I don't. I mean, he's not quite 30. I think just Gary. Well, maybe this is the way to answer that question all the time. Like Gary Harris fits on every team, just depending on what you're willing to pay him, and Fultz fits on. I don't know. Like it's just he's such a harder player to build around, and while he's younger, while I guess he's still got the draft pedigree and is I guess probably a better bet to be healthier. Although like this is Markelle Fultz, like there's been some health issues. I don't know if you recall. So I guess it's Gary Harris, but like really, if we're talking about the Magic, we can't pretend as if like retaining either of these guys or Goga Bitadze, by the way, who's a free agent. Shout out, guess a player Goga. It's just like their free agent questions are who are we getting, not who are we trying to keep.
Yeah. Do you think both between Gary Harris and Markelle Fultz, do you think either one of them will be back?
I would guess no, just because you're going to sign someone over the top of Gary Harris and Fultz. Just like I don't see a reason to bring him back unless you want a third point guard. And
you're just very confident they are going to like get after it. Like and sign someone in free agency.
I just think the combination of like resources and clear need is just they line up too well. And not that this is the greatest free agent class of all time. I think we've talked about before. I think Orlando needs to trade for someone and sign someone in the backcourt rotation. It just, I mean, wouldn't you be stunned if they didn't sign someone that's going to be in like
just like to then let both of these guys walk? Who are you signing? Because you could like pay if Gary Harris makes equal money. You still have like 25+ million in cap space left over.
I just wouldn't have bringing either of those guys back, Harris being the bigger priority, as anywhere like towards the top of my list of like must-dos for the offseason. I would bring Harris back at, I don't know if I'd pay him 13, but high single digits maybe.
I'd pay him 13.
Would you? I guess
is he going to get a 4-year, 3-year? Like I would pay him. I'd probably give him like 2 and 30.
Well, I guess that just depends on like what you think you could do with the rest of that.
But
I guess you do it after.
You probably know your trades lined up too, and so like it might. And if you trade like, what if you end up making like Jonathan Isaac and Cole Anthony for Michael Porter Jr. type deal, and then it's like like now we kind of just went 2 for 1. We could probably use Gary Harris back a little bit.
Yeah.
So
all right, that takes us to another team for me. Another one I copped out on, which is the Philadelphia 76ers. My actual toughest decision is what the hell do we do with $60+ million and like basically 2 guys on the roster. Joel Embiid will be back. Don't know if you heard. Tyrese Maxey will also be back. He's just not technically under contract right now. And then after that, you have the one and only Paul Reed, and you have Ricky Council IV. That constitutes the Philadelphia 76ers current roster. I guess Jeff Doughton has a team option for $2 million. So I guess
I think they end up keeping Ricky Council and Paul Reed, and that'll be like they go in with 4 players as like their tentative cap holds.
Yeah. So we cannot pretend like the Paul Reed $7.7 million non-guaranteed contract is a real decision point for them. Like he's more than worth that. And even if it's only as a trade piece, which he's not, he's actually going to be in the rotation.
Well, we could really galaxy brain it and say, should they be the Isaiah Hartenstein team? Because look, if Joel Embiid only plays half the season each year.
Can I talk? I know you're not being serious, but like,
oh man, here we go.
But this idea that like we need to be done with the idea of like the insurance player for a superstar, because if you don't have Joel Embiid, like it doesn't matter who his backup is unless his backup's Anthony Davis or Jokic or whatever. Like if you're the Sixers and Embiid is hurt, you're screwed. I guess like as a regular season thing, like, oh, he keeps you from sliding too far down the standings. If you have Hartenstein, for just hypothetically, but like you're done if you don't have your best guy. And the whole point is to win a championship. So it doesn't matter who the backup is.
That's a good point. And I was about to
like, it just, that theory does at the highest levels.
Yeah. I was about to frame it as, well, is it all right? Well, let's get a 4 who can slide up to the 5, but also play alongside Joel Embiid. But that doesn't really, that's more of a regular season thing too. It's like that'll help you navigate and eat innings. But like in the playoffs, if you don't have Joel Embiid, you're just cooked anyway. So
it's done. Doesn't matter. So I think the question for them just has to be, we'll pivot a little bit. It's like, what do you do with all this money? Like, what's the plan? Is it Paul George? If it's Paul George, like then what? Where how are you filling out the rest
cap
of the
space is gone if you're maxing them out, basically. Like
yeah, right here. Well, you got what? I guess if you count minimums, yeah, that what Paul George is going to get close to 50 of that, like 62-ish million. It looks like they're going to have. Yeah, I think it's about 62. Although that presumes that's with Maxey.
That's a cap hold. So like, yeah, I can say where it is.
Yeah, you can time it differently. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you want to go a different direction on the Sixers, but it's just like they don't have anyone on the roster to decide.
It's almost their decision is like, well, who on the roster? Because they're not gonna. So excuse me, it's almost twofold to where they have to decide whether they're gonna do their most heavy lifting in free agency or via trades. And if it's going to be via trades, then you have to ask, okay, like which of these free agents of our own are we bringing back? You don't have bird rights on Kelly Oubre Jr., but will he come back for? You have the cap space, sure, but can he come back? Like because you have the room exception, which is just, I know it's relative to the salary cap, like $8 million isn't nothing. I still think Kelly Oubre Jr. would probably want more, but like that's a tool in their belt. If they're like, so you could stop, let's say they sign Paul George, they're going to keep D'Anthony Melton. They have the room exception. Can they keep the Kelly Oubre Jr. with that? I don't know. That's like that's far from a worst case offseason, but you're still so pretty shallow at that point. So I think probably the toughest decision for them is, well, are we going to actually do serious work in free agency, or should this be about rolling over useful salary slots of good players? Well, maybe going after some of these like a Simone Fontecchio, just taking a look at these guys who are not stars, and then we're going to have to make a trade using some of these contracts. Now, the issue with them, though, is if you go that route, yeah, okay, cap space is cool. So, like, let's say they decide to use their cap space in a trade before going back and signing these players. That's just all you really have to offer aside from draft picks. And as we've seen with teams, let's use Toronto as an example. There are teams that in a vacuum could have easily have beaten the Knicks' offer for OG Anunoby. How much he wanted to be in New York, I do think played a role in that, but let's remove from the equation. Toronto wanted players. Mm-hmm. If you run into that scenario again, like if they want Mikal Bridges from Brooklyn, okay, 5 first-round picks of varying degrees of value is fucking cool. Brooklyn's going to want bodies, and you don't have bodies to offer them.
Yeah, it's interesting that what the Sixers are equipped to do is like take on kind of a bad contract. Like if the Warriors decide to let's move Andrew Wiggins, like the Sixers should be like, cool, give us like a second rounder, we'll take him, just like that. Or
would you do that if you're the Warriors? Are you at that point where it's
no? I think you try some other stuff. Like you got Chris Paul to waive, you got Kevon Looney's partial guarantee, you got like there's other ways to go first. I don't think giving Andrew Wiggins away is like the smartest use of that resource.
What if you were getting a second round pick for Andrew Wiggins?
Well, then it's done. No, but that's not what they should really be. There shouldn't be in the market for that. Like that is not the most exciting use of your cap space. You'd have to just hit right and be like, oh, we're going to get good Wiggins and know that somehow. If you did something like that, but like, let's maybe, because I don't want to be dismissive of like the significant number of actual incumbent Sixer free agents. Of the guys that are there, Harris, Buddy Hield, Batum, Covington, you mentioned Melton, Kyle Lowry, Campaign, Kelly Oubre, like just a bunch of guys that like, if you brought all those guys back, like, that team's pretty good. If you had to pick, let's just say between Melton and Hield, who's more likely to be back?
Melton.
I think so
even
too.
With the back issue stuff. But I think Buddy Hield, Melton, and Oubre, and if you want to throw Kyle Lowry in there, but that just kind of feels extra. Like those are the guys that I'm looking at as like, all right, I want to bring these players back. And maybe Kelly Oubre Jr. actually falls outside that bucket because part of what was so tantalizing about him is that he doesn't pass, but also just that he was so good relative to the minimum.
Right.
What does he look like if he's making closer to mid? How do you feel about that if he's making mid-level money?
Even if he's making Melton's money, it's like they're both $8 million players in this hypothetical. It's like, oh, I don't know. I kind of like Melton better.
Melton might be a guy with the back issues, though, that you just renounce him to use the cap space, and then does he come back for the room exception?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I noticed it's weird you didn't mention Tobias Harris as someone that might be
that
back.
Will be, in terms of players, Tobias Harris being back in Philly might be, I don't want to say the single biggest shock of free agency, but it would be in the top 3 of something happening, right?
It's up there for sure. I just like, if you had to like, where does he go and for how much? It's just like, you could tell, I have no idea. Like I have less of a feel for that than anything.
Imagine, is this just a no? And it's not for an absurd number. What about him in OKC?
It's not just a no. I mean,
hell no.
it's a get out of here. But this is offensive to me. No, I could see it, but like, what's that number? 20 a year?
Like, but for short term, like by the time that J Dub or Chet Holmgren are on like their next deal, Tobias Harris is off the books.
Yeah, that's like a separate question though, because for the Thunder, should they do the Houston short-term big money thing? Because like, I guess it's sort of similar to Houston where you've got all these extensions like coming down the pipeline and you got this window, but maybe I would want someone that's under contract for longer, but like, I just don't know who that is. Yeah. But to your point, like Harris, it's like, he's the opposite.
I don't know if his rebounding is good enough but it's better than the corpse of Gordon Hayward, or like if you're going to sub in Isaiah Joe for Josh, like you could very easily sub in size now for that like kind of fifth spot to go with Shea, Chet, and J Dub, and then Lou Dort I kind of consider just like a staple.
Yeah, Harris is the opposite of Oubre, where it's like you're in terms of like Oubre looks great judged against his contract, and Harris is just looks terrible judged against the value of his contract. And if they both made the same amount of money, if they both made $14 million a year, you might just think Harris was you would feel better about Harris, like his Q rating would be higher than Oubre's.
His Q rating, yeah.
I don't know. Let's move on. You got the Suns.
The Phoenix Suns. 26 other NBA teams want to be them, but they can't be, which is lucky.
Why 26? What did you ever think about like why it's 26? What about 29?
He's a predatory mortgage lender. I don't really know what is that? I don't read anything into what he's saying.
I just want to know which three he thinks.
I am ready for shit to happen with this team because the way he's mentioned, like, first round picks are stupid, and like he's not wrong based on the situation that they're in. But it's like, oh, to be a Suns fan in 2020-30 is going to be rough. That's all. That's all I keep. I know we shouldn't care when their window is now, but woo, when the window isn't guaranteed to be worth it, I think it's fair to care. Okay, so it's Royce O'Neal for them. They are going to enter the summer basically like just with an absurd payroll. They're at, if you're going to 200. Yeah, and that's without, by the way, carrying Royce O'Neal's cap hold, which is $18 million. They're at $201 million. They're in the second apron. And so now, because you can't aggregate salaries, we get into the same two questions. You're not signing anyone with a minimum who's going to be better than Royce O'Neal, who his defensive workload in the playoffs was, for the short time that Phoenix was there, was massive. And two, okay, well then what's the number? Like if we ever want to fold this into another deal, like, yeah, okay, cool. He's willing to come back for $10 million. That really fucking do it for us if we're trying to make a trade later on? I don't know. Now, if you get Royce O'Neal for $10 million, I might just do it because that's actually kind of a bargain. But you can't let him walk. He can leverage you to the hilt, though, in part because I think he would be not on the same scale as some of the other guys that we mentioned, but among teams with cap space, there's really not a one he doesn't fit on. Like, just as someone who doesn't need the ball on offense and you can move him around defensively, he has definitely regressed as a defender. But now he's also been in a few situations. Utah, skipped over that a little bit in Brooklyn, but then in Phoenix, where it's like, oh, he's defending dudes that he really never should have anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's not a tough decision in the sense like they can't let him walk, but you do have to decide, okay, well, how much do we pay him? And so I'm going to give you this. Over under Royce O'Neal getting the full MLE. It wouldn't be actually the MLE, but $12.5 million.
I think it's got to be over because there will be MLE offers for him. He's coming off making 9.5. Like, it's not that big of a leap at age 31 to go up over that 12 number. So I think someone will have that ready for him. And if you're Phoenix, like, you have no recourse. Like, this is just, it's going to suck. It's going to cost you all this and much more with all the tax penalties. But what are your alternatives? Like, you just, I guess, I don't know, Nas Little, you move up in the pecking order and we sign another minimum guy. Like, that's not a great outcome. So I think I'd go over. Don't you go over?
I'd probably go over too. I'm just gonna be fascinated to see the length and terms of it all. So like, because they have those 2 first round picks, but again, now you can't aggregate them. So it's, well, how much value does Royce O'Neal really have? Let's say they're really thinking ahead to the trade deadline. And so you're moving your 2031 pick at the trade deadline. And then who's the best guy you could get like for that? And do you then like try to structure O'Neal's salary accordingly where it's like, all right, well, we signed Royce O'Neal to a 1+1. He's making $24 million next year, but like, it's okay because we can bring back this $24 million player.
That is, I hadn't really thought about that, but teams in their position, if the idea is partly like, well, we know if we sign Royce O'Neal for 12, we can't take anyone back making 12.1. So like you don't get that nice little bump up that you do if you're not second apron. So like maybe it's so like it's almost like diabolical where it's not forcing, but it's like incentivizing a team in this position to spend even more on an O'Neal like declining scale contract, because then well, I can trade him for a $20 million player now with like, that's just terrifying.
And what makes it, and now people could point out and say, well, they already have Grayson Allen on the books for 15 plus, and they have Yusuf Nurkic. Those guys have money left on their deals after next season. So if it's sort of 1+1 with Royce O'Neal, that's more flexibility for his next team. I don't think many teams want Yusuf Nurkic in the first place. And then Grayson Allen is just way too important to you to just say, let's attach our first round pick to Grayson Allen. Who's the best 15.6 or less $1 million player you're going to get for a 2031 pick in Grayson Allen? Honestly, don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, so that's why the Royce O'Neal contract is fascinating, because you could structure it like it could be so inflated and then so short term that it's like, well, they're trying to do what the Lakers did with D'Lo.
I'm so into this idea now. I really hope it happens. I hope we get a Royce O'Neal 1+1 for like $50 million. Like, just because, I mean,
what's also tough though is like, how much value does your 2031 pick have as the centerpiece of a deal to a front office that's acquiring it and knows, well, we're not going to be the ones making this pick?
Well, yeah, that's true. But if just like, I was going to say, well, what if you're Detroit or something, but like Detroit's front office is going to flip like tomorrow, probably.
Maybe that's how you get job security, is you lay out this 7-year plan.
Right.
That includes Phoenix's 2031 pick.
Just as like, if you're a bad team with cap space it should be in the business of getting what's probably going to be a really kick-ass valuable 2031 Suns pick, like, is it worth, $25 million basically, like, just or whatever you end up having to take on for O'Neal? It's like, kind of might be, but then you're right, like that whichever GM swings that deal is probably not going to be there to reap the benefits.
The other thing I would do, and they would never do this, is that I would create my own rumor mill by signing him to the exact same amount of money that Mikal Bridges is making next season. And so it's like, oh shit, are they like 2031 and Royce O'Neal get you Mikal, like to the cent, like to the dollar. That's just what I would do to see, like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, let's start the discussion.
I love it. There's maybe the second apron's not restrictive. Maybe it just is going to foster creativity like we couldn't have imagined.
My counterpoint is that if things get more punitive or they reinvent the way this whole thing is working, that Matt Ishbia is going to probably be the reason why.
Yeah, that's true.
The Portland Trailblazers, they're pretty low stakes here. I didn't even have you can't identify I don't want to phrase it this way. You can identify a could-be free agent if you want to, but they're not gonna waive Tamani Kamara, non-guarantee. They're not gonna. I would be shocked if they waive Jabari Walker. They do have to decide though. Well, fuck, do we need open roster spots? Because when you include, okay, we're gonna guarantee those two guys, they will have then 15 guaranteed contracts on the books when you factor in their current draft picks. That's not going to stand. Also not going to stand is they will enter next league calendar year in the luxury tax. And so it's, all right, well, what are we doing to create roster spots? Is this I think literally anyone who's not Shaedon Sharpe or Scoot Henderson feels like they would be in play here. And if you're looking to strictly cut costs, that's when you get into the RW3. Malcolm Brogdon is DeAndre Ayton ambling his way onto that. Jeremy Grant, of course, will be an apple of team's eye. But they just need to kind of figure out how to, they're going to get under the tax. So what does that look like? And can they also create roster spots in the process of doing that? And the answer is yes, they can, just because it's the off season. So it'll be easier to do that. I'm just very curious to see how they go about it. It's pretty simple, but it has such an undefined answer. I was just staring at their depth chart in their cap sheet. And this is a really weird, unideal place to be.
It's really, the first thing that jumps out is like, you're looking at the cap sheet and it's like, okay, so they got 178 million in salary, give or take, depending on what they do,
to win 15 games next season. Yeah.
There's 6 million plus into the tax. Like, if you mess around too much, that 190 figure for the second apron's like just kind of, eminently reachable. But like they do have the ability to just say like, I don't know, we'll get rid of Malcolm Brogdon and for something, and like then we're okay salary wise. They're the rare team that is one, bad, two, very expensive, and three, like still needs. What a weird. This is just such a bizarre roster construction. Which will not stay that way. Yeah, that was a tough one for you. I don't know what the like difficult decision is there. Much easier one coming up.
Yeah, and it's mostly because it's the only answer, because in a way it's not a tough decision. Malik Monk for the Sacramento Kings, since I didn't even mention the team that we were on, 4 years and $78 million is the maximum that they can offer him because of the early bird right situation. I think you offer it, but then I'm kind of thinking, all right, well, will they? Because it's not just a matter of, well, will he have a better offer? But it's, well, do they want to pony up that much and then have to deal with the tax implications of that? They are, as of right now, if you don't include Malik Monk's salary, they are a team that has, let's say, about $15-16 million in room beneath the tax. Re-signing Malik Monk obliterates that, and then you're not a finished product. Are you using some version of the MLE? Are you going out there making a trade that ends up, taking on money? I think you have to offer it, just because you don't have anyone on the roster who can replicate what he's doing, and maybe you can view it as, all right, like we still have Keegan Murray on his rookie scale. Keon Ellis is a great find, and so we don't have to do anything super dramatic. It's just keeping Malik Monk, and then we kind of make some moves on the margin, use the mini MLE at that point, probably. I don't know who you necessarily get for that, but like, it is a tough decision in the sense of, okay, well, it's a guard and we still kind of do need wings at this point, but like, we could also talk ourselves into another like true front court players and a big man who can play beside Domas Sabonis. You're not going to have cap space anyway, so just pay him. It's probably a discussion they're having of, well, do we want to give Malik Monk 4 years and $78 million to be what'll probably be their sixth man? Or then you're just having a weird, at some point, if your starting backcourt is Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox, those two could play minutes together, but how good do you feel about that? What does it then say, though, if you pay Malik Monk about the future of Kevin Huerter specifically, would be the name that I'm going to look all over at. So it's him, because it's really only him. There's no, like, you're looking at the other, like, could be or would be free agents, and it's all right. No, like, we don't care about Alex Len here.
Yeah, I think it has to be him. And I also think they have to offer the 4 for 78, just because, like, the counterfactual of them not doing that doesn't give them an avenue to, like, okay, well, it's not like, well, either we pay Monk this, or we save that money and we go down these other roads where we get this player or this player and that. It's like, well, that doesn't create any real flexibility for them. So you just he has to be back. I think the more interesting question to me, and this isn't on the Kings plate at all, like, their decision is, do we offer it or not? And the answer, yes, you do. I think the question is, like, is that enough? Because Orlando's the one I throw out all the time. Like, does he just get way more than that and he's gone anyway?
Well, but like, that's not their decision. Right. Like, that's just, my whole thing is, what is the team? I've seen Orlando floated out a lot, and I understand it, but like, Malik Monk, yes, I know the percentage, but like, he's not a caps lock shooter. And he's also just, like, his playmaking is so predicated on needing some semblance of spacing because he has to get downhill. It's not a bunch of from a stop or a bunch of side to side stuff. I just don't like, that's not the team for me. At least I'm Orlando. That's not the guy. I understand he could fit. I don't know if he's the optimal fit. And then you go through the other teams and I'm like, well, who is giving him that money? But then there are just scenarios where it's, if he gets 2 for 40 and decides that he's young enough, he wants to get back into free agency, that's not something that the Kings can give him, basically. So they go that, like, 2 for 50 or something, like the Bruce Brown type deal.
Yeah, no, I think, and it's just another, like, danger element here. He hasn't really made a ton of NBA money yet, coming off, like, he's at the absolute apex of his value. That's always a little scary. Considering, like, the lows of his career have been really low, like, was out of the league for, not a performance related issue, but like, just, it's a little scary to be like, we got to come over the top of the Kings' best offer if you're Orlando or if you're whatever other team you want to throw out there. I just kind of feel like well, how about this? Yes or no? He's getting a bigger offer somewhere than 4 for 78.
I don't think he is.
I kind of think he is. So this will be one to track. It's not going to be like $100 million, I don't think, but like, it could.
But I think you also have to look at it as, it has to be, I would think, appreciably enough more than what the Kings could offer. So you're looking at, what is the lot? Like, if someone offers him 4 for 80, is he just going to leave?
I mean, you'd think it'd have to be a little more than that, but what if they say, because this is the other thing. I think he should probably start in Sacramento, but you mentioned him. They still have Kevin Huerter. Kevin Huerter started over him when he was healthy. If another team says 4 for 80 and you're starting, like you are our lead guard potentially. Like I mean, like in Orlando
I'll
is
bet the under on that team if that is the example that you're laying.
His per 36 numbers are great, Dan. He's a starter hiding on in a 6-man role. I don't know. I could just see a team having that as like the trump card potentially if the money is close to equal. But like in that scenario, and you're Monk, then you really might want a shorter deal to like run up some numbers here and get back on the market potentially. But that we've strayed way away from.
Well, no, I mean, look, that's a fair thing to talk about because it might be more powerful. He's young. He's 26 right now. Yeah. So like, it's not like someone who's in their 30s and this is his chance to get his first big deal. I don't know if he's going to want to necessarily bet on himself to be like, well, if I can get back in free agency in a year or two, is that something? But it's something that should be and could be on the table. We're on to the Spurs, though. I couldn't bring myself to focus on any of their, I can't, like, Jetty Osman doesn't move me. So I'm going with cap space or nah for this team. If they renounce all their own free agents, except for Champagny, guarantee him. Waive guys, non-guaranteed guys, waive Devontae Graham, who has, I think it's like $2 million guaranteed. You could get to about $20 million in cap space. That's a weird spot to be right now when the mid-level exception is 12.4. And so like the room exception is, you could view it as separating into two parts where, well, then you have the $8 million room exception. So having 20 million in cap space plus the room exception, that gives you the ability to do a lot of fucking stuff. Are the Spurs going to go that route, or are they going to decide, hey, like it just makes more sense? Like, not that they necessarily need to operate as an over the cap team, but do they just go that route where it's, well, we're better off using Devontae Graham as an actual expiring contract in a trade, so we'll guarantee the 12.7 million. We bring back Jetty Osman just because we want shooting at maybe a slight raise from the 6.7 that he's at right now, and we just kind of move forward with that. We'll look at using the full mid-level exception. So it just, I don't know what they're going to do. And looming over all of this, of course, is everyone believes, and we have been advocates for accelerating your position in the West with Victor Wembanyama, who made first team all defense, by the way. First time that's happened for a rookie in NBA history, and it was absolutely well-deserved. So it's, well, how does that fit? Like, what's the better route to go? Is it cap space or having these? Is it like, yes, you can use cap space in trades again, but teams always want bodies? Or is this something that if they're not going to do it, make the decision right now, is it better to have the guys under contract that you can move at the deadline or at a future date when you do decide to make more of a consolidation trade? I don't know what the answer is for them. I look at the free agent market and it's kind of like, why would you operate with cap space? But even if it's a matter of just getting Tyus Jones, it probably makes sense to operate with cap space.
Yeah, I think I lean that way too. I almost wish they had some harder decisions to make. Just be well, one, because it'd be better content for us to discuss.
You want me to talk about what they should give Mamu in a restricted free agency, or we could talk about Dominic Barlow might be a little bit of a decision, but I think it's just like that's too low stakes for me.
What do you think about Charles Bassey's non-guarantee? Like, what do we do there?
Well, who's more likely to be on this team next year, Charles Bassey or Dominic I think it should be Barlow.
I'd say Barlow. Yeah.
That's the content everybody came here for.
Yeah. Dominic Barlow versus Charles Bassey. Where else are you getting that? Nowhere.
Maybe on a Spurs podcast.
Locked on Spurs, maybe. I have the Toronto Raptors. So I'll say what it is.
I'm sorry. How does this work in relation to the pick conveying, which you're about?
Well, because you don't have that first round salary slot to consider when you're putting their cap together. So I mean, just a plethora of options because of the pick conveyance.
That's like meaning Jakob Poeltl's $8 million less than he actually is this season, technically, right?
Like, I never thought about that.
Saved you the cost of a first round pick. That was just ingenious by Masai.
Incredible. Not saying this is it, but just so we have a kind of a global view here. Gary Trent Jr. made it to free agency. Made it. Now what? Don't know. Not their top priority, but they did not trade him. This is the last vestige of the like, come on, Masai, you got to get off this expiring contract. You know what happens. He did it with Siakam. We did it with OG. Couldn't quite hit the trifecta with Gary Trent. We can talk about him if you want later, but they've got, let's see, I'm trying to think of any other housekeeping for them before we get to, nope, nothing that's moving me. Jordan Nwora is.
Well, should they extend? Do you think that they should extend Chris Boucher?
do you? I know.
Honestly, no, because I would like him to be on a team that's going to properly utilize him as the focal point on both ends of the floor that he should be.
Okay, that's fair. We can. I will stop with the preamble. Emmanuel Quickley is a restricted free agent. Depending on when and where you got his salary expectations over the course of the last year, there's everything from Quickley not accepting a Knicks offer worth about $18 million a season before the trade. There was Michael Grange reporting that he wanted 5 for 135 or in that range. So the question or the toughest free agency issue is just like, what's that number got to be for Emmanuel Quickley? Like, what is he a $25 million a year guy? Is it going to have to be over 30? It's I don't know where the outside offers are coming from necessarily. I guess we have to just obligatorily mention Orlando.
Well, I like him. Who do you prefer for Orlando, Quickley or Malik Monk? I like Quickley better in Orlando.
I would rather have Quickley, for sure. Well, I shouldn't say for sure. I think I'd rather have Quickley. But so there is, I guess then from that perspective, there's more leverage coming in against Toronto on him than there is coming in on the Kings for Monk, or really any other, one or two that can shoot it and run the offense. Do you have a feel for like what number for Quickley, just say average annual value, like feels about right? And that's considering from Toronto's perspective, like we traded some stuff for this guy, we can't let him go. So maybe there's a little premium on it. Like what number, if it comes in, is like, okay, I get it. That's fine.
Something, but if he gets 25 or less, I think that'll be super team friendly.
Okay.
So I would look at it more as like 27 to 30. I would be fairly shocked if he winds up getting the max, but I guess with like Detroit floating around there and being super reckless, it wouldn't surprise. I know they have Jaden Ivey, but it's Detroit, and who knows how married the next front office will be to Jaden Ivey.
I mean, he's someone I bet the Spurs wish they had a little more cap room for.
Well, they could get there. Keldon Johnson, you just trade him into someone's cap space and done.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe we got to find a trade with Toronto if you wanted to do something like that.
Ooh, how about this? Keldon Johnson, you're gone. Detroit's taking you into cap space. Emmanuel Quickley becomes a Spur.
Oh, I would just feel really bad for Keldon Johnson in that scenario. But so what would surprise you more, if he gets $25 million or less per year average annual value, or if he gets the 4-year max, which is 4 years, 150, let's call it 158. It's like 157.9.
I think the 4-year max would surprise me more. That's such a big, I mean, that's close to 40 a year.
This team has so many tough decisions to make. Like there's the Gary Trent thing that you mentioned. It's, do we roll over Bruce Brown's team option to use him as a matching body in the rotation? They just have like a weirdly medium to high stakes offseason on their hands right now. Scotty Barnes' extension, not free agency, which we probably should have mapped that out, where everyone's like, well, like, why didn't you mention it? It's not free agency, so we're not talking about it. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nice that they know where all their picks are going now. So, I mean, now that that's off the table, they can turn to Scotty Barnes free agency. I really want to throw it to you now while you're choking, so you can have to talk through the Utah Jazz.
I have energy drink in my eyes and it's now burning.
Oh, you're mainlining it. I see.
That just caught me off guard. That was great.
Point, if you're not ready for a pick conveyance reference on Toronto, and that's
on me. I shouldn't have sipped at all during the Toronto segment.
Now that we're free of Toronto and I've given you a moment to collect yourself.
OG powered through the hamstring injury to play 4 minutes. I'm going to do one better and power through the rest of this podcast with 1.5 eyes.
This is your last one because I have the Wizard, so just make it.
The Utah Jazz, they have like, I guess it's a pretty big decision. It's Larry Markkinen, who, by the way, I botched this for some reason when I totally wrote about it. And well, that's an off-air conversation. But anyway, the renegotiate and extend with Larry Markkinen, it's, should we bring him up to the max looking at the cap space that we have or anything close to it? Or do we let him hit unrestricted free agency, pay him later because we value that flexibility? And it's just like, I don't honestly know what you do, because I think in essence, if you're Utah and you're saying, well, we're operating on this gradual timeline, why wouldn't we just let's just say they bring his salary up to the max for next year, which would be $42.3 million, which is like $25 million above what he is making. And they have the cap space, by the way, to just make that happen. They could have over $35 million in room is what they're probably projected to about have. They could increase that number if they really wanted to. They could work with a smaller number if they really want to, keep Taylor Horton Tucker for some reason. I don't know why they would, but so they have the money to do that. But if you're going to do that, you're kind of creating this urgency, and it's like that cap space might be useful then to help you maximize that urgency. I don't know what the right answer is, but if you're going to keep him, it just makes more sense to, well, let's do this now so he's not a free agent ever. And then that's probably still a contract you could move down the line. But to use 25 million, or even if he takes, maybe the concession is, well, I'll take less than the max, or the salary starts declining after I get the max. We've seen that happen already in the past. I don't know. I think it's a tougher decision than people make it out to be. I would do it if I was Utah. I want to make that clear, but just using 25 million or 20 million, whatever it ends up being, of your own cap space, just to basically keep the same roster intact,
right?
That gets weird.
It's really hard because I think what you're doing in any renegotiate and extend for him is trying to find a number that, one, it's worth his while to sign for, and two, that preserves or maybe even increases his trade value, because like that, he's 27, like Utah is nowhere close. Like that's just, I think he ultimately, whether he signs a contract that, theoretically like keeps him in Utah for longer, he's really like, he's a contract to be traded. I think it's just that feels like the most logical, like ultimate outcome for him. You can't go, I mean, so maybe there's a number that would be an interesting thought exercise probably for another podcast. Like there's probably a number where you're actually, even though you're adding years, like maybe that makes his trade value lower than it could otherwise be. Like, I don't know.
If you can get him for 4 and 120 total.
Yeah.
That probably increases his trade value, but that's
right.
And by the way, the other thing that we could mention, I just assume it's a non-option for his plate. If you just sign him to a basic extension, the starting salary on that is going to be like 25.3 million. He's not signing that, right?
No. Okay. If you could sign him to that, like then, oh my God, like what
that's
a
like the Jalen Brunson territory of, did you see that they expect him to sign the 4 for 156.5 extension, which is just shocking. Like, that is, this is someone who came in on a second rounder salary and then now signed a contract that, yes, it was deemed market value at the time, but turned into one of the best bargains in the NBA, and is now going to sign another contract where I'd say at least the first 3 years of that, just because like it's going to be a bar. I know you're playing for Tibbs. It takes you through your age 31 season or whatever it is, but like that shot, like this would be on the same. Honestly, it'd probably be more shocking to me just because the number's so low. If Lauri Markkanen just extended to get $25 million.
Yeah, no, that we should have probably talked about that with the Knicks. We talked about it before. It's like, that would be, what a coup for the Knicks if they could get him for that number. It's crazy.
By the way, if he does that, I'm calling it right now. Mikal Bridges ends up on the Knicks. The only reason to do that is to make it much easier for your team to navigate the 7 apron moving forward. And they've promised you something else, and that something else is another Villanova Wildcat. That's the only logic behind this. Because even if he doesn't get the 4-year max, which is like 208 plus, or the 5-year max, which is like 270, I'm doing all these rounding things right now for anyone who likes to work in exacts, like you would still get a shit ton more money than that. And you could be hedging against injury, but I think he's now reached the status where if he gets injured next season, I hope he doesn't, and he just had surgery on his hand, he's entering 2025 free agency, declining the playoffs, so someone will give him the 4-year max, right? Like that's just happening.
I think so. Like, what would have to happen for that? We probably shouldn't even talk about, like, something terrible would have to happen for that not to be the case.
So I'm honestly surprised. I know his ties to the Knicks organization. I know there might be an allegiance there because they kind of oversaw his rise to superstardom and he's playing with a bunch of guys he loves, but that would be just, and maybe we're just way off and we're not sure. He's a smaller guard. He now has some injuries in the rear view. How does he age? But I don't know, man. Just looking at like he could even just, again, even if it's not the max, like getting 4 years, like, and 180 or something, just like that's so much more money.
Yeah.
But this is the Jazz. So I think that's their most important. It's clearly their most important decision. Do you expect to renegotiate and extend with Lauri Markkanen to get done? Or, what's more likely? He gets traded or renegotiated and extended?
Oh, that's fun. I guess I really want him to get traded, so I'm like trying to like pull back from that.
Typical big market,
shithead and I want him to get traded to the Thunder. So I'm just really showing my big market bias. Let's go from Salt Lake City to Oklahoma City. I'll say it's more likely that
I didn't think it was this. I didn't think it was this hard. To be honest,
think it's kind of hard. I guess it's more likely he renegotiates and extends. I don't know. Do you have a strong feeling on it?
Yeah, I feel strongly it's more likely they renegotiate and extend. We didn't get into your number on this really quickly. Is there something that's like, are you comfortable with him on the max?
I think he's probably, I was going to say, I think he's probably still a hugely positive trade asset at that number. He's not like best player on a really good team level. So I guess like by definition there's plenty of guys that make maxes that's true for. I'd like it a little under the max. I think like that seems a little rich for me. Are you going full max?
I probably would just because I think you look at it as you're taking off one of those years next year when he's still in his prime. And then as a trade asset or just from a team building perspective, it's just like you have fewer years left on it. And I know that means he can get paid sooner, but the way that the NBA is set up is a lot of the time you reach a point in your career where you are paid for what you have done rather than what you're actively doing or going to do. And this just kind of makes sure you're within that sweet spot of like, he's getting paid what he's worth right now. By the time the contract ends, he's probably worth that or close to it.
Yeah, he's at least even if on the back end, it's like he's not worth it anymore. It's those previous 3 years. He absolutely
what the fuck happened? Like he's only gonna be 30 at that point. Right. Like what had happened in that? You have bigger problems if that's the issue.
Last, but I mean maybe least early in the conversation for least.
Portland had the least. Like I mean, it was an interesting thought exercise, but they were the least compelling one from a like there. But it's also the Blazers are technically in the tax as of now, but I think they're the team where it's.
So we got to talk Anthony Gill. I mean, he's unrestricted. No, I mean, like even going from that to the actual pick, which is Tyus Jones, is like, I mean, it's a pretty big leap, but it's not exactly the highest stakes. Tyus Jones, unrestricted, was not traded at the deadline.
He wasn't.
Can you believe it? The Wizards certainly. Like he made $14 million last year. I actually kind of think did I already say this? I can't remember. I think there's a decent chance that like he could end up with a bigger total value contract than D'Angelo Russell might get if he declines his player option. Not annual basis, but like if you go, this is like if D'Lo declines and goes like 2 for 50 and Tyus Jones in free agency gets like 4 for 60 or something like that.
So you're basically just saying like Tyus Jones is more likely to sign a long-term deal than D'Angelo.
Just total dollars on the contract. I think.
See it.
Yeah.
I thought for a second I thought you were like kind of on the level of me saying Fontecchio over Jaden Ivey. That
no, not an annual value. I don't think. Although 14 and D'Lo made like 18 or 19ish.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, honestly,
they're not that far apart.
Yeah.
Yes, and if you're talking just like universal fits, like Tyus Jones obviously fits in more places than D'Lo does. I think it's just the smart money should just be on the Wizards have to bring him back at whatever like reasonable number there is. They can beat the market for him. I assume. I guess again, Orlando might want a guard, but like he's just going to be brought back to be traded.
When that's been your take, like it's.
Well, it's I know I'm not like mocking it. It's like I feel like I say it so much that I feel like
we've had people get mad at you because you said Orlando needed a guard because they didn't think they did. They have Markelle Fultz. They're fine.
Yeah, they're fine. I guess like this isn't even quite like galaxy brain, but like the 2 steps ahead is they didn't trade him because they know they can sign him to a longer deal that will make him more valuable as a trade chip just because the team getting him has greater security. I think Tyus Jones is a good enough player where multiple years is actually like a value add as opposed to, he's a rental, which, last year he would have just been a rental. And there are plenty of teams that could have justified it. But I think that's got to be the play here. Get him back for, 3-4 years and mid-level or significantly better than that money. And then you move him to it. And so like, that seems like the likeliest outcome to me. I don't know how difficult of a decision that is other than like, what does the number need to be to maximize the return on the trade?
The other thing is I know he's maybe not the caliber of player where it's fully in his hands, but like it's not just because the Wizards are willing to pay him X doesn't mean he just leave for a better team. With
that's the element that makes this tougher, right? Is they may have to go higher to get him to sign with them, and then if you go too high, suddenly he's not as valuable as a trade chip. So
that might be why it ends up being like a short-term thing where it's
maybe.
like this sign like 2 for $40 or something just because he gets that higher annual amount.
It could be. It's all a question of like what makes him more palatable for a trade partner, because like he doesn't have value to the Wizards other than like the adults in the room, like take care of the
they
ball.
need a floor general. Like they need a floor general.
Right, but like to do what? Like this team is not gonna play any serious games for at least a couple years.
So what is the does he end up like how much does he end up making? Because like he can charge the Wizards attacks of like, hey, you suck, you're going to trade me, and you also need me. Otherwise, you just don't really. I mean, they could go out and they could sign like a cheaper point guard, but like, could you see if I said it's 16 million? Is that even too conservative for him?
No, because you got to beat the mid-level, I think, for sure. And so
that's less than he's making now. So yeah, if he signs for the mid-level,
right, it'd have to be. It's just for him. It's like I think I keep thinking of like, well, what's a 4-year deal look like? 4 for 60, 4 for 65, like something like that. But I wonder if what you were kind of getting to is like just the shorter deal, right? The 2 for 36 or something like that, or 2 for 40 or something, 38, something like that.
Honestly, you mentioned 18, like 3 for 54 feels like the Tyus Jones like sweet spot deal.
Well, but is for him, I think that's pretty great. But like, I wonder if you're trying to trade him as the Wizards, is he more movable on 3 for 54 or like 2 for 40, or do you want that 4 for 65? Like, I don't know which one makes him more palatable. Is it the longer security or the dollar figure per year?
You have to measure it against, does playing for them repress his performance in any way to where he could have a more efficient shooting season just because the talent around him isn't great. I mean, if he's running, teams look at, why would we want to trade for this point guard who's running the 28th best offense in the league or something?
That's the thing. And like, really, if you're Washington, you should specifically be thinking of like, well, because like, what player do we want back in the $15 to $17 million range? That's like, we need a young guy who's projectable and like can be it's just got to be for a pick. Like,
you're hoping that he becomes worth a first on his next deal.
Yeah,
I would lean towards, I'd probably give him whatever he wants within reason, just because he still is super valuable to offsetting the playmaking workload of Deni Avdija, helping set up Bilal Coulibaly. And it's just one of those, we've talked about this a lot, where it feels like there are guys who may not fit your timeline, but they very clearly can help streamline the development of those who do. And he feels like a perfect case study of that type of player for what, like including the guys that the fringes of the roster, and then also just who they're going to add via the draft this year.
Yeah. I just wonder, like, if the Spurs come in and say, or he goes to the Wizards and says, I've got 2 for 45 coming from the Spurs. Like, what are you doing, Washington? Then like, that's where it gets tough. Cause I think you're right. Like, the walk away should not be an option, but there's got to be a number where Washington says like, all right, well, that's too high for us. That would be a disaster if he left for nothing.
Speaking of him bilking Trey Jones of the starting spot in San Antonio, that'd make for some awkward Thanksgiving dinners, right?
Dog eat dog out there. You gotta get in where you fit in.
Was that all? That was all 30 teams, right?
Yeah, alphabetically anyway. we end in Washington.
Stat padding time, Grant. I have questions for you. Are you ready?
I have answers. Question mark?
You have all the answers. That's the confidence we want to see. Mr. Grant Hughes, which NBA player is more important to the future of their current team? Jaylen Brown or Derek White?
Oh boy. Jaylen Brown.
LaMelo Ball or Brandon Miller?
Brandon Miller.
Aaron Gordon or Jamal Murray?
Aaron Gordon. Sorry.
Wow.
I did it.
Jalen Johnson or Trae Young?
The future. How much future is there? Trae Young, because that trade package.
Patrick Williams or Kobe White?
Kobe White.
Donovan Mitchell or Evan Mobley?
Evan Mobley.
Anthony Davis or LeBron James?
Anthony Davis, just because his future is longer in the NBA, I think.
Kyrie Irving or Derek Lively?
Oh. Lively.
Jaden Ivey or Asar Thompson?
Asar Thompson.
Jalen Green or Amen Thompson?
Amen Thompson.
Paul George or James Harden?
Paul George.
Desmond Bain or Jaren Jackson Jr.?
Oh, man. Jaren Jackson Jr.
Jaden McDaniels or Karl Anthony Towns?
Karl Anthony Towns.
Ooh. Tyler Hero or Jaime Jaquez?
Jaquez.
Herb Jones or Trey Murphy?
Just dead even split. I'll say Trey Murphy.
I like it. Jalen Suggs or Franz Wagner?
It's still got to be Franz.
I disagree. Chet Holmgren or Jalen Williams?
Oh, well, it's obviously Jalen Williams. You can't ask me that question.
What's the actual answer, though?
It's still Jalen Williams.
Keegan Murray or Domantas Sabonis?
Keegan Murray.
RJ Barrett or Grady Dick?
RJ Barrett.
Denny Avdia or Bilal Coulibaly?
Oh, this one hurts. I got to go Denny.
Isaiah Hartenstein or Mitchell Robinson?
Hartenstein.
Keontae George or Walker Kessler?
Oh, that's interesting. I think it's George.
Aaron Nesmith or Miles Turner?
Turner.
Brooke Lopez or Chris Middleton?
I'll say Chris Middleton. He's under contract for longer.
Jeremy Grant or Anthony Simons?
Simons.
That's all I got for you.
Man,
those seemed a little bit too easy for you.
I wanted to ask a question. I was like, Dan, what do you actually mean future? Like,
you know what? The people who consume the shorts don't give a fuck. So we're not going to define it. Do you want to have some time to run through some guess of players?
Of course. Like, I just got to pull them up here. I assume I have some new ones, but I'm not positive.
I have one. I didn't respond to Be Rich, but he gave me one for you. Ready to get in the mind of a psychopath. Thank you, Be Rich. My messages are I'm inundated at the moment. I need to catch up.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up some from Mike here. I'm ready.
Clue 1. I was drafted in the lottery in the 90s, helping my team reach its conference semifinals during my rookie season.
Lottery in the 90s, conference semifinals, rookie season. I have to try, don't I? Drafted in the 90s. Shit, I don't know. Sharif Abdur-Rahim.
That is incorrect. Clue number 2. I have the 100th best win shares per 48 season in NBA/ABA history for my 2001-2002 efforts, one spot ahead of Santa Clara legend Ken Sears.
Let me pull up my encyclopedic knowledge of the all-time greatest win shares per 48 seasons.
Well, I would assume you just know where Ken Sears ranks and who would be in front of him. No,
is it McGrady?
It is not McGrady.
Okay.
Clue 3. I finished my career 33rd in playoff assists with 764, ahead of Kyle Lowry, Danny Ainge, Darren Williams, Terry Porter, and Derek Fisher.
So a lottery guard, conference semifinals, like that's ever going to help, and played in the 90s to 2000s. We already did Andre Miller. It better not be Andre Miller.
It is not Andre Miller.
Okay.
Are you ready for the next clue?
I got nothing.
I'm ready to give you the next clue then. Clue number 4. 3 of my most similar players are LeBron James, Larry Bird, and Charles Barkley. In other news, I was quite good at basketball.
Okay, so maybe not a guard. A bunch of playoff assists. Is it Kobe Bryant?
It is not Kobe Bryant.
Okay.
Clue 5. My career true shooting percentage was 55.1, despite only shooting 18% from 3.
Oh. I don't know what kind of player this is. It's all over the place. A bunch of assists, but the comps are forwards. Yeah, I don't know. I got nothing.
Clue number, what are we up to? 6. My career net rating was plus 14 due to an outstanding career 96 defensive rating. Did I mention how good I was at basketball?
So good at basketball.
You will get it on the 7th clue.
Okay, cool. Well, will I? I'll just go to 7. I don't know.
Despite never winning Defensive Player of the Year, I'm one of the best defensive players in history. I'm also one of Grant's favorite players.
Is this Andrei Kirilenko?
No. What the hell's the matter with you?
Which I got a lot of favorite players. Never. Oh, is this?
Well, you should be more judicious in how you hand out your affection.
Don't tell me how to love, Dan. Is it Tim Duncan?
Yes, it's Tim Duncan.
Okay. Sorry, Tim.
The final clue was, if for some reason it isn't obvious, I was born in the Virgin Islands and the patron saint of San Antonio. So the name was not included in the initial gap on this. And I thought it was Tim Duncan because I didn't look at it until we started recording, but the assists and true shooting threw me off. I didn't realize his true shooting percentage was that low. Relative to league average, it was fine, but the numbers are so ingrained. I was like, no, there's no way this is. But then the final clue is like, well, how is it not Tim Duncan?
I mean, several of look, this is what it's like to be in the mind of a psychopath. So these clues are designed to throw you off the scent for like, he's just like messing with you for the first like 3 to 5 clues. And then you get thrown a bone there. All right. I see how we're going to play this game from now on. I do have one for you from Mike. I don't know what odds I'd give you on this. I haven't looked at the clues yet. Are you ready?
You just know the player. That's an interesting way to go about it.
Well, there's a lot of clues and there's a lot of information. The player is like, well, we'll see. We'll see how hard or easy it is here. Clue number 1, I was drafted in the first round in 2014 and traded on draft night. The trade was largely due to pressure from the team's star player who had called me his favorite player in the draft, and the team wanted to make him happy. I didn't read that clue, but you may one shot.
Napier.
Correct. One shot kill. Sorry, Mike. There's like 600 words of clues that you put together for nothing. One shot kill. That clue had to come later. That's like the single most known thing about Shabazz Napier, right?
By the way, for anyone who says, and I don't want to burn too much on this, that no team would draft Bronny James in hopes of getting LeBron James, something similar already kind of happened with Shabazz Napier. They did it in hopes of keeping LeBron James.
And he wasn't even related. Like, imagine what's possible now.
Right.
All right. We have to clue 2. Notable players taken after me include Clint Capella, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Slow-Mo, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jeremy Grant, Jordan Clarkson, and 3-time MVP Nikola Jokic. Never heard of him. 3, as a rookie, I averaged 5 points a game on 38% shooting from the field. By the way, the star player from clue number 1, he was no longer on the team. Tough break. 4, in case you're wondering how rough my rookie season was, I was traded after 1 year with cash to the Magic for a conditional second. Sorry, Mike. Actually, you apologize, Dan, because you did this. You rendered all this work useless. There are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 clues in total. Lots of information about, for example, this past season, Napier signed with Serbian powerhouse. I shouldn't have gone down this road. I can't pronounce this. Crvena Zvezda. Joining former NBA players Nemanja Bjelica, another one of my favorites. Joel Bolomboy, Onion Kuzmic. It's 2 former Warriors. Marko Simonovic, Milos Teodosic, and Javonte Smart. What a stacked roster. If that didn't win the Serbian league. I should stop.
This kind of ruins the one-shot kills for me because I feel bad how much later.
I know. It's a double-edged sword, the one-shot kill. All right, do you have something?
And honestly, let's just call a spade a spade. I'm the czar of one-shot kills at this point. Like
you've got more than I do for sure.
We'll go back for the scorekeeper. I do have one. You said he has Bill Walton stuff for me. I have a guess a player from Mike for you if you're ready.
All right, why don't you give me that, and then I'll give you the Bill Waltons, and we'll call it.
Yeah. Clue 1. My name was invoked in a Chance the Rapper song in 2016, several years after I retired. This was from Young Thug saying, I got me some rings like I'm blank. I'm balling on you like I'm Chris Paul. This is because I am a 3-time NBA champion. It's just fun. I'm laughing because I just know you of all people are not going to be the one to know who this is.
I was hoping it would be an easier rhyme to guess. Like what rhymes with it? Well, you'd give it away.
I'm just impressed that you knew Chance was a rapper.
Why do you assume I don't know about?
You mean the Dalmatian from One Dalmatians, or something?
I also get that reference. If you want to get a sense of the breadth of my trivia knowledge, wasn't there Pongo? Isn't that another 101 Dalmatians?
Pongo, Perdita, Patches, Roly Poly, or something.
All right. Enough. You win. What are Cruella DeVille's henchmen's names? Can you remember those?
Oh. Horace and Jasper.
We are doing the wrong kind of guessing games around here. Look at you.
What? How are we here?
I don't know. What are we doing? I'm supposed to think of a player that was in a Chance the Rapper song. That rhymes with Chris Paul, maybe, that has 3 championship rings. I don't know. I gotta try though.
I feel like this is fair. It doesn't rhyme.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I just have to think of all the 3-time NBA champions out there.
That Chance the Rapper would also know exists, and Young Thug would also know exists.
Oh, okay. All right. Now we're narrowing down. Chance the Rapper is a Chicago rapper, I think. I think he's from Chicago.
I didn't know that.
Let's see. 3-time champ. So who was on one of the 3-peat? Well, I'm going to say Luke Longley. How about that?
Incorrect.
No? Damn it.
I like where your head's at, though.
Trying.
Clue number 2. I went undrafted in 1993 and started my professional career in France with Le Havre.
Undrafted in 93, but he wins 3 titles.
I apologize for all the butchered pronunciations.
Yeah, I'm not very good at the undrafted 1993 players.
I am confident you will get this player, though, if that's any consolation.
Okay. But 3-time champion that was undrafted. Okay, I don't know.
Clue 3. Between 93 and 97, I played with 5 teams bouncing back and forth between the France and the Rockford Lightning of the Continental Basketball Association.
93 to 97 with 3 championships and is not even in the league. God damn. I don't know.
Clue 4. I made my NBA debut in 1997, signing a 10-day contract with the Heat. In my debut, I played 1 minute, scoring 0 points, but recorded a block. This was my only action as a rookie. Shit.
97 Heat. Man, that's helpful. I still have just no idea.
Clue 5. The next season I signed on with the Celtics, I played 61 games, starting 9, averaging 1.4 steals and 5 points.
Heat, Celtics. I want to say this is a European player, just because he was like 4 or 5 years in France, and I forget what else you said. What was the other team?
CBA, Continental Basketball Association.
So that doesn't mean anything. 97. I don't know. I'm all over the place. What's the next clue, please?
Clue 6. The next season was a disaster as I fell out of the rotation, only playing in 30 games. I averaged 2 points, shooting below 30% from the floor. My NBA future was in jeopardy. I don't think that's going to help you.
Is it Dino Raja?
It is not him, but holy fuck. Good guess. In 1999, I signed with the Sixers, but was traded to the Bulls and immediately waived. I would then sign up on the Heat again for the rest of the year to save my career.
Oh, man.
So he's back on the Heat in 99, 2000.
Who was on those Heat teams? No, that's way too late for him. I got nothing. I can't think of who this is.
I think this is where it starts to get a little spicy. You got 4 or 5 more clues left.
Okay.
Clue 8. I re-signed with the Heat in 2000 and finally put it all together, earning my first NBA accolade as I was named second team all defense. This is 2000.
2000.
Oh, you're going to get it on the next clue.
Good Heat defender. It's not Kurt Thomas, is it?
It is not.
Okay, that's too late, I think. All right, what's the next one?
Clue 9. That offseason, I signed with the Spurs, being named to the second team all defense again. The next year, I did it a third time, this time while starting all 82 games. However, the best moment from that season was either winning an NBA title or karate kicking Wally Serbiak in the face mid-game.
Bruce Bowen?
There you go.
Okay.
Final 3 clues. Every year between 04 and 08, I was named to first team all defense, winning my other 2 rings along the way. Clue 11, my jersey was retired by the franchise, but conditionally unretired when the Spurs signed LaMarcus Aldridge. Clue 12, I'm one of the few legitimate Kobe stoppers in NBA history. Ooh,
that's a bell shade. Starting with all the early career stuff is a really good way to go for that, because once you get to the Spurs, it's like, and you have the era, that one's over. I forgot. Now it's like, yeah, I can picture him with a Celtics jersey and a Heat jersey, but that's okay. All right, good one. Dan, Who's Bill Walton talking about?
Yeah.
Blank just made the worst pass in the history of Western civilization. Is it JaVale McGee, Doug Christie, Bonzi Wells, DeJuan Wagner, tremendous inclusion, Tony Parker?
Who are the first? Who are the Doritos back? Tony Parker, JaVale McGee, DeJuan Wagner.
Doug Christie is in there, and Bonzi Wells is in there.
Let's go with Bonzi Wells.
It is Tony Parker.
Damn.
That must have
Bill
been
Walton likes to go to like Inhumanity, Western Civilization. Well,
loved Western Civilization. Really is a big fan of that as a superlative. All right, number 2. Blank's arrogance is an insult to people who think. Gary Payton, Quentin Richardson, Steve Francis, Shaquille O'Neal, Chris Kaman.
This feels like a. What were the options again?
Gary Payton, Quentin Richardson, Steve Francis, Shaquille O'Neal, or Chris Kaman.
This feels too obvious, but I'll go Steve Francis.
It is Shaquille O'Neal.
Damn
it. I want to see, like, I wish we had the ability to understand how a person's brain like jumps from one thought to the next, just to explain like how Mike settles on which names to include. because like so you'll understand why when I read you the next group, because it's just like, how are these people ever associated in your mind? Clue number Bill Walton-ism number 3. He looks like a ballerina out there. Primoz Brezec, Tim Hardaway Sr., Chuck Hayes, Marcus Fizer, Adrian Griffin.
I have Chuck Hayes.
You're correct. It is Chuck Hayes.
Shit.
The balletic Chuck Hayes.
Oh my God. 4. What a crop of players. Good job, Mike.
Primoz Brezec. I've had him on a fantasy team years ago. I forget why.
Do you love him also? Is he one of your favorites?
No, I think he underperformed. I don't love him.
Oh, so Grant's affection is conditional.
It's super off. If you want to know one thing about me, it's
your poor kids.
Yeah, if you don't score a goal, it's like you're walking home. Like most of the fan base here, I want more from him. I want more. I should have read I don't want a 6-inch. I want a 12-inch. Coutinho Mobley, Tyrus Thomas, DeMarcus Cousins, Darius Miles, Lauren Woods.
Wow. I'm going to say DeMarcus Cousins.
You're correct. That's 2 in a row. That has to be the first 2 in a row ever achieved.
Bill Walton. Yeah.
On Bill Walton. I have 3 more. We have to continue because you can't end on a make. Number 5. Blank might be the most injured athlete in the history of sports. Not Western civilization, to be clear. A, Derrick Rose. B, Vince Carter. C, Yao Ming. D, Tracy McGrady. E, Bill Walton.
Oh my God. I want to pick Bill Walton, but I'm not going to. I'm going to say that it's Yao Ming.
You should have gone with your gut, Dan. First instincts are always correct. It was Bill Walton.
Talking about Bill Walton, incredible.
First ever Walton on Walton. Crime? I don't know. 6. Is there a better shot blocker on earth than blank? Joakim Noah, Michael Stewart, Vlade Divac, Spencer Hawes, Jerome James.
So it's PTSD from that Jerome James contract in New York.
Just when you think of the best shot blocker on earth, I mean, which of those guys is it?
Who are the other 4 locked into Jerome James?
Yeah, you're really fixated. Spencer Hawes, Vlade Divac, Michael Stewart, or Joakim Noah?
I'm going to go with Spencer Hawes.
It is Vlade. Just like incredible how many wild ass. Okay, last one. Lindsey Hunter, just starting with Lindsey Hunter.
Did you fuck up?
No, that's not even the blank. This is amazing. Lindsey Hunter is making blank look like John Stockton today. Mike Bibby, Brian Shaw, David Wesley, Devin George, Earl Watson.
Earl Watson.
It's Devin George. What are the sets of circumstances that lead to Devin George being compared to John Stockton? And how is Lindsey Hunter making him look like John Stockton? I just have more questions than answers at this point.
Love this segment.
It's like since it's Bill Walton, it feels appropriate. It's like you're pulled into like a psychedelic realm where like there are no laws and nothing makes sense and like logic ceases to exist.
Are you ready to take us out of here?
I've thrown off because last time you did it, and now I don't know which way's up. Thanks everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed some evergreen content. Sometimes you got to throw that in there. It was a good exercise for us. Hopefully, as you're getting into checking out your team's off season, or just are curious about the league wide off season potential here, this will be something to refer back to or get you, squared away on some of this free agency stuff. Don't let anyone tell you free agency is going to be boring. That's usually not the case. If you don't already, please remember, rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple, any place. Leave us a good review. Word of mouth is also helpful to help us grow this podcast. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Join our Discord. You can submit Bill Waltonisms if any exist still out there that we haven't covered yet. Guess the players, stat padding, all that stuff. We get a lot of value out of that. Hopefully you will too. I think that's going to cover it. Get links for our Discord and our merch in the YouTube and podcast description. Closing, as always, with a shout to the one and only Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen.